Okay, everyone, we're going to get started. I call the City Council Redevelopment Agency meeting for September 26, 2011 to order. We could all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we will get started. Item 2, changes to the order of the agenda. Mr. Maltby?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we have a request this evening from a member of the public to move item 10B, which is the consideration of introduction of an ordinance amending the San Carlos Municipal Code section 10.32, establishing no overnight parking and 2-hour parking limit zone in front of 75 and 125 Shoreway Road, ahead of item 8A on the agenda.
Okay, that's fine. We can do that. Anything else? Okay, reports from closed session. Mr. Rubens?
At the special meeting immediately before this meeting, we did have a closed session, but there is no reportable item from that closed session.
Okay, we'll move to item 4, council communications and announcements, and we'll start with Mr. Lewis.
None to report, thank you.
Mr. Vasili?
None to report.
Mr. Grocott?
A couple of things. One thing, I had asked about our street sweeping and how it was paid for and so forth. We did get something in our council newsletter on the item, reporting on it. I would like to have that put on our agenda for future consideration about how we pay for street sweeping. That was something that came out of the discussion, so if we could do that.
That sounds fine. Mr. Maltby, did you take note of that?
I've got that.
Okay. Is there anything else, Mr. Grocott?
Yeah, a couple other items. Also, we had somebody come and speak to the council on the our city's ICLEI membership, and he also had sent some follow-up emails, and I'd like to see that if we could put on the agenda as well for consideration. And I had a question for staff. I know maybe the mayor knows. I was thinking this was going to be on our agenda, and it's not, the zoning, and I didn't see anything about it's moving, so I was just going to ask. Maybe when they do reports to council, they could talk
we can get that from a report to council.
When that's coming up.
And then regarding your ICLEI question, we're having a report from the strategic planning retreat in 2 weeks, correct, Mr. Maltby? It's our monthly report?
That would be correct, yes.
That would be a great time to bring that up, and then we can vote as a council if we want to discuss it or not. Because
so we're discussing our strategic planning.
We can add it to the agenda and set a date
sure.
If you'd like to bring that information
okay.
then.
All right, sounds good. And then the last item I had is just I've talked to the city attorney, or excuse me, the city manager about this, and then I've had some people in the community bring it up about parking in the area where I live, and there's one, I think it's one person in particular doing has a car that's parked on Walnut that is full of clothes and things like that, and it's unsightly. So I just wanted to bring that up for the attention of staff that that needs to be taken a look at.
Okay.
That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Grocott. Mr. Royce.
Yeah, so a couple things going around going around town here. One has the attention of council and a lot of citizens and our sheriff's office. We in the last month have, I believe, had 3 auto accidents that involved pedestrians. One gentleman, 77 years old, passed away actually a couple days at the intersection of crossing of Alma and Carmelita. I actually know that gentleman very, very well. He lived right up the street. I know the sheriff's office. I know the city manager is working very, very hard on it. I don't have a report tonight, but I do want the public to know we're interested. We're paying attention to it. And this morning myself, I had an opportunity to be coming down 280, and I went by Heather School, which actually my wife teaches, and there were 2 patrol cars watching at the start of school, all the parents and the students showing up for school. And so on the way home, I stopped by BA, and they also not only had a patrol car, but our volunteer Frank was out on the beat on the sidewalk kind of watching what was going on. So we have their attention, and of course we feel sorry for the person who passed away and the people that just got hurt, but I'm sure we'll report more, but it's a very critical issue. generally, when I've talked to several people about this, the first comment everybody says, people drive too damn fast around this town. And, we got a lot of attention around the schools, but throughout the town, I think you have the attention of myself, and I know every council member to my left and right here, so we're going to be doing some work on that. And on a lighter note, I do want to mention October 3rd, this next Monday morning, if you're downtown, there'll be a new coffee shop in town called Pete's, with 2 E's, with really good coffee. So be there the first day. It'll be an exciting opening for them as a new business on Laurel Street. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Royce. I have a handful of things to announce. First off, prior to this meeting, we had interviews for a position on the Arts and Culture Commission. We had 2 outstanding applicants, and as always, it's hard when you have 2 outstanding applicants to decide who you're going to choose. But the council decided, and we're happy to announce that Fred Kohler will be our new commissioner. Thank you very much, and thank you to both applicants. Next, on Saturday at 10 a.m., we had a ribbon cutting for the new Loriola playground. If you haven't had a chance to go see it, you should go there. There's a tot playground, a 5 through 12-year-old playground, and a water feature, and I believe the water feature will stay on until October. That's correct, so until October, and then it will shut down for the winter. But it's a fantastic playground. The kids were very excited, and we had a good little event. Also, October 1st at 7:30 a.m., there will be a swearing-in of the San Carlos Fire Department. It will take place at the fire station on Laurel Street, which is located in the 500 block. So 7:30 a.m., there will be some light refreshments provided, so feel free to come by. And then October 4th, on the same block, at the San Carlos History Museum, there will be an open house for city council candidates. We have 3 candidates running for 2 positions. It'll go from 6 to 8 p.m. at the San Carlos Museum. So feel free to stop by at any time during those 2 hours, and you can talk to all 3 of the candidates. They will be there. And moving on, we will go to item number 5, public comments. We only have 1 speaker card from Andre Carpio.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is André Carpio. I come from Emeryville, and I am the owner of the solar car Carp that was stolen here in San Carlos. In a memorandum issued by the police to the attention of the city council, there is a mistake that is obvious. First, among all other statements, it ended by saying that this is a civil case, but then the memorandum itself is a paper that make a decision because they made the thief get away with my car. So there is a basic contradiction there. You do not say it's a civil case when you decide yourself the issue. And not only you decide yourself the issue, but you publish the issue. And this causes great amount of prejudice. I have to remind the council that the court is very cautious about making statements to be published or to go on record, because if it causes prejudice, the court doesn't do that. But here, you did it. So this is bad. And I want to remind you that, as far as I'm concerned, you are the ultimate policy making with the oversight of the police. So you are responsible. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carpio. Okay, we have no other items. Are there any other members of the public who wish to speak on non-agenda items? Seeing none, we'll move to item number 6, approval of consent calendar. Consent calendar items are considered to be routine and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion on these items unless members of the council, staff, or public request these specific items to be removed from separate action. Any council members wish to remove any items? Anyone from the public? Seeing none, we'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, make a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Is there a second?
Second.
Madam Clerk?
Councilmember Versilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Councilmember Lewis?
Yes.
Councilmember Royce?
Yes.
Mayor Klein?
Yes. Okay, moving on to item 7, reports to the council. Mr. Maltby, I think the only thing we will have is a quick response to Mr. Grocott.
That's correct. In response to your question earlier, Councilmember Grocott, about the timing of the zoning ordinance coming before the City Council, it was originally scheduled for this evening. However, over the last month, the Planning Commission and EDAC reviewed the zoning document, and several changes were made that required staff to go back, have a little bit more public input, and they wanted to take it back to the Planning Commission one more time, which I think is happening, or just happened. Okay, happening October 3rd. So we're going to be bringing that back to the City Council at their November 8th council meeting.
Okay. Any questions, Mr. Grocott?
No.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Maltby. We'll move on to
One other quick thing, Mr. Savay just gave me an update that the applicant on 10B may not have gotten the message that we could move up or would be considering their request to move up, so they're not here. So we'll leave 10B where it's at.
Okay. And seeing that, Mr. Maltby, do you have any information? I know there was an e-notify sent out, but for anyone who's watching about the PG&E, I know they're going to be flushing their system, so we're going to smell some gas for a couple days.
That's correct. PG&E is taking line 147 out of service in various sections beginning this week. 147 is a transmission line that is a connector between their pipeline that runs down the 280 corridor and their pipeline that runs down the 101 corridor. They're going to be taking that out of service. This week they're going to be venting all the natural gas into the atmosphere from that pipe, which is part of the procedure for testing. So I don't know, they've already started to do some valve work in town this week, and I could smell natural gas in town. So to the public, they should expect to hear some loud noises over the next several days, as well as smell natural gas as it's vented. What they'll do after that is they'll fill sections of the pipeline from valve to valve with water and pressure test it to test the integrity of the line, and they'll move down, starting I believe up in the hills, moving down towards El Camino, doing their testing over the next 3 weeks.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Maltby. Ms. Royce.
Yeah, just one add on here. I had a discussion with PG&E this last week. At our last council meeting, I had asked them if in their repair and work on that pipeline, if any of the valves are going to be switched to the automatic remote turn-off valves. That was an issue that came up in the study with Jackie Spear and so forth. There are no remotes in the county, but the plan is to put some of those around, and I was very interested as part of this work where we end up within, if we do have any remotes, because it is a residential area, about half of that line, and would be very interested that when they do their work, they do all of the work the right way. So they promised to get back to me, and when they get back to me, I'll get back to you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Royce. So we'll be moving on to item 8A, which is a study session on the East Side Connect project. Mrs. Nelson.
Yes, Mayor and council members, I'm Deborah Nelson, the planning manager, and I am also the project manager for this project, which is really quite a fun position to be in, to do public works projects and planning together. You last saw this project in June. You, at that time, allowed a contract with Callender and Associates to do the design, which is of a project on Old County Road and East San Carlos Avenue as the result of a $2.2 million grant that we received 14 months ago from the Metropolitan Transportation Commission. We're combining that with 2 bikeway grants that the city already obtained, some match money, and some money toward an undergrounding district. Where we are at this juncture is in the midst, sort of towards the end of a community input process, which began in August with Mayor Klein at the farmers market with staff and consultants, and we've been at that community input process all summer, and tonight you will see a design, and we're asking a preliminary design and asking for your input so that our consultants can go off and do the engineering design for submittal to Caltrans, which oversees the expenditure of this money. Brian Fletcher of Callender Associates will do the presentation. As a sub to Callender and Associates is Brian Kangas Falk, and Jason Mansfield is this person there that we've been working with. We've also been working throughout the process, actually early on in getting the grant, with a steering committee of the community. GESC board member, Dimitri Vandelos, a business owner, the restaurant supply business, Scott Crampert, and a Transportation and Circulation Commission member, also a bike advocate, Tony Panero. And we intend to continue to work with that steering committee throughout the process. We'll meet with them again in the next month or so after your input. I want to also talk a little bit about the underground district. We need to come to you at a public hearing for you to define on a map the limits around which you want to underground. We have suggested undergrounding because much of the streetscape improvements are dependent on undergrounding to make the sidewalks much more accessible. It's not just a beautification issue, but it's really all about access for pedestrians and bikes and people using the transit system. We will come back to you probably in a month. The account that you put aside for us to do some undergrounding work is for us to hire a special expertise to go drill little cores in the street and figure out where all the underground facilities are, then report back to us so that we can do the design of a district and come to you with pretty clear numbers on how much it would cost and how much money we have to extend over a certain distance. Our priority is the frontage on the residential properties and in and around the transit station. So we'll be back to you probably in 6 weeks or so with that. So I'd like to introduce Brian Fletcher, and he has a presentation for you. Thank you.
And just so the public knows that we do have a speaker slip, we will take the presentation, we'll have some questions from council, we'll go to public comment, and then we'll see if there's any discussion needed.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. Brian Fletcher with Callender Associates. My job here tonight is to be as efficient as possible in explaining the work that has gone on since June is when you last saw this, as well as the fruits of that labor, which is the conceptual design plan that has received community input, Transportation and Circulation Commission input, and such. As you know from that June meeting, there were several objectives for this project. Number one, first and foremost, is to obtain public input. What is the community's concerns, desires, and such? In addition to that, there are several aspects to this project. Deborah mentioned the undergrounding. Deborah also mentioned the MTC grant, which is the improvements to Old County Road, mostly pedestrian and bike circulation improvements, which also includes a bike boulevard on East San Carlos Avenue, which is essentially creating a much more bike-focused or awareness of bicycles on that street. We've also combined the bike lane grant that the city has also obtained, as well as pavement rehabilitation funds. The process since June, we've had a couple farmers markets. We've had an open house on July 30th. We've been to Planning and Transportation Commission's second workshop on September 7th. And then finally, just before this, on the 20th, we went back with these plans to the Transportation and Circulation Commission. So tonight, we're presenting those plans. We are going to be then, based upon all the input, developing construction documents and hitting our number one major deadline, which is February 1st, which we're calling January 30th, which is the deadline for the MTC funds. We must submit bid documents by that date in order to continue on with their regulations. As far as the award or any potential start of construction, this is anticipated towards the end of 2002, beginning of 2013. As you know, the project limits are essentially Old County Road and East San Carlos Avenue. Because of funding, we would not be able to do full sidewalk width improvements for the entire thing. That's not to say. And I'll get to where we're going to focus sidewalk widths and where we're going to focus on bike lanes and other more minor improvements. As the mayor knows, and we've got proof that we did have an open house. We had about 40 plus people come to Loreola Park and share their ideas. We gave them several opportunities to give that input, ranging from image boards to questionnaires to just drawing some lines on a map and showing us where the problems were. My job is to show you some of that input that we received from that. This is where those members that attended, where do they live and work? Generally, people showed up from within the area. How do you use it? Shopping and eating, driving to work, taking the train, biking. This gives you kind of a glimpse at exactly how the street's being used. What is the biggest concern? You can see, and this is pretty consistent, pedestrian safety as the #1 priority and concern on people's. We call them inspiration images, but again, people just have the opportunity to respond to photographs of what could be along the street. You can see where those votes came out: wider sidewalks, street trees, crosswalks, bulb outs. Again, kind of in line with pedestrian improvements, making it more safe for pedestrians. What amenities? Again, wider sidewalk, trees and plants, public art, bike lanes. Again, this is just giving you a glimpse of the input. Sound looks like a whole lot of lines and scribbles, but what this was a fantastic tool to tell us exactly where the problem spots were. I mean, you can see here is Holly at Old County Road and El Camino. So again, these lines start to tell where the desire lines are for people to walk from their home into downtown and such, and where we need to focus some of those needed pedestrian improvements. Part of the project is more than just pedestrian, it's also identity. We asked the question, can you describe your identity? People responded different than the rest of San Carlos. However, when we asked the question, what elements, in this case lighting, would you want to see, people focused, we want something similar downtown, the Acorn fixture. So the idea is to connect these two sides of the tracks and bring Old County Road more in line with what downtown and some other areas of San Carlos are doing. We took that input. We also took a look at the history. There's been a lot of study over in this area. So the history on other planning efforts, including the Holly 101 overcrossing, which includes a study for pedestrian and bike circulation down East San Carlos and then across. We took a look at the plans that were developed to get that bicycle lane grant. And then in addition, we took a look at bike lane feasibility study done in 2008, transit village plans, and general plan traffic studies. Again, we want to make sure that what we're bringing forth tonight is consistent with all these prior planning efforts. These are the plans that were presented at the community workshop as well as the Transportation Commission. I'll run through them efficiently. The overall plan shows in green where we would have Class 3 bicycle routes, in pink where we would have Class 2 bicycle lanes. In pink line right here is the focus area for the undergrounding, which also is consistent where the residential neighborhoods are.
Excuse me, Brian.
Yeah.
For the sake of the audience and everyone on council, can you just define Class 2 and Class 3?
Let me go back. So there's 3 different designations for bike facilities, and this is Caltrans designations. There's Class 1, which is a separated bike pathway. It's separated from all vehicular traffic. Then it goes down to Class 2 bicycle lanes. These are physically striped lanes on a street. Finally, there's Class 3, which is a bicycle route. These are designated routes with signage that bikes are on the road. There are additions to the Class 3 that can be done, which is called sharrows, and you see these all around town. They're the chevrons on the lanes, which gives a heightened appearance to those to the motorists. Parking was a big issue. We looked at various opportunities to regain some of the vehicular zone back for pedestrian and bicycle improvements. On the east side, which is the residential and business side, the area that would be removed is from Commercial to Howard. This is essentially Kelly Moore Paints, Pep Boys, and any of the areas in front of a Home Depot. Beyond there, on east side, all the existing parking is retained. Okay, this was a priority from the community input and meetings with the business owners. However, on the west side, with the exception of areas, and the west side is along the Caltrain corridor. There's an area between Harbor and Quarry. There's some businesses up towards Belmont. That parking would be retained. There is a small amount of parking, which I'll show you photographs of, just south of the train station. Those are proposed to be retained. And then everywhere else on the west side, we're proposing to remove parking. That allows wider sidewalks and bike facilities. I'll begin to go through the plans. This is Old County Road at Sylvan. Essentially at these intersections, we'd be looking to do bulb outs. These are the parking zones here. We'd go from a 5.5-foot sidewalk with obstructions, which are the overhead utility lines, to an 8-foot sidewalk without obstructions. So a much more safer and inviting sidewalk. We then would be doing, and because the width of Old County Road changes over the whole distance, we'd be going from 13-foot to 14-foot travel lanes with sharrows. So these are the areas that we would have a Class 3 bike route facility with painted chevrons or sharrows. So you can see the 8-foot sidewalk. We're going to be looking to get street trees. It's a myriad of utilities here. So we're going to be looking where we possibly can get the trees within there. 8-foot parking zones and the shared travel lanes. And again, no parking on the west side. Now I'm going to explain the Old County Road Holly intersection, and I want to just make sure everyone is clear on the existing layout. In both the north and southbound directions, we have a right turn only lane, a through lane, and a left turn lane. And this is consistent on both sides here. We also have a horrible sidewalk at 4 foot wide with many obstructions and driveway aprons here, making it extremely difficult. We're currently working with Hexagon traffic engineers, who's done a lot of the traffic engineering within this neighborhood. They took a look at this intersection and took a look at the counts back in 2009 and took a look at the right turn movements. Again, we're looking for opportunities that we can recapture some of that space. We came to the conclusion that because there is such limited right turn movement, that it would be feasible to remove those right turn lanes, both in the northbound and southbound directions. Then those cars would move over to the through lane, so instead of just a through lane, it would be a through and a right turn lane. We also studied the movements, and it should be noted that this intersection works in tandem with El Camino Real. Because there's more traffic on El Camino Real, that means there's more than enough green time on Old County Road to clear that intersection. So even with that traffic moving over, that intersection would be cleared with the green lights. So what does that look like in plan view? Here is Holly Street. Here is Old County Road. Before, where we had right turn, through, and left, you can see we have a through and right turn, a left turn. In both instances, we've got a striped median. The reason why we've got it striped is because there's the occasional truck movement that happens here, that we want them to be able to go within that median and to be able to make that instead of stopping traffic and such. So you can see that through lane come through. This is going northbound on Holly. We've included a bike lane in this section only to allow for bicyclists to actually climb that hill, so they would have a protected area or a striped area to do that. This island over here, what you'll see the benefit of that in this section here, continuing on, is that we would have the ability to create a left turn pocket into Loreola Park. Right now there isn't, so where you stop and try to make that movement through, a lot of times it blocks traffic and such. So this would be an opportunity to highlight the amenity of Loreola Park, provide safe access, and provide signage in a new median to direct people into Loreola Park. We're now moving to the train station itself, and I just want to, everyone's clear of this one, is the different movements and the different types of people and users that use that. We have shuttle stops. This is supported by Caltrain. I've observed it many times. These shuttles are timed with trains coming in, so they're timed to come in when people are coming off the train. They pick up, and then they come down East San Carlos Avenue, and then on into Redwood Shores. Other people using the area are the taxis. On observations, this is seldom used, not as nearly as much as the shuttles. And then we have the parking. This is just south of the train station. It's about 15 to 20 stalls. That is highly used. These are people that are parking there because they don't want to pay to park on the Caltrans lot. However, the community has concerns. If that is removed, will that force those people into the neighborhood and become an issue? So the proposal here is to recapture the taxi stand and to move all the taxis over to the El Camino side of the transit facility. And what you effectively can do there is create a much more generous pedestrian zone in front of the Caltrain station. And let me just give you a little bit of orientation. Here's East San Carlos Avenue. This is the Caltrain station. From this line to this line is where it dips underneath. That's the overhead, and you can dip underneath and go under. So this is where the taxi stand is. Effectively, would be bulbing out that location, reducing the lanes down to 12 feet, probably 13 feet, and Jason can talk to that in a little bit. And then we've moved the shuttles just south into this location here. So in this concept, we're still proposing to retain the shuttle bus and support mass transit in the area.
I'm sorry. You said the taxis are going to be on the west side?
So the taxis currently have a location on the west side.
But wait a minute. I'm confused on which. I'm talking west side of the train station, I thought you said.
Yes. So
where
they would be moved to the El Camino side of the train station.
Where would they be?
Within the parking lot of the train station itself.
So the taxis won't park on Old County Road anymore. They'll have to go in. They'll be on the El Camino side in somewhere in the parking area.
That's the proposal, correct.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry.
What happens at East San Carlos Avenue? Currently, right now, the crosswalk is at this location. It's not lined up with East San Carlos, nor is it lined up with where pedestrians want to go. So we're realigning that crosswalk and making it a signalized intersection. So we have pedestrian crossings in this location here. We also have a bike access ramp down the middle that would provide easy access via Sharrows onto the bike boulevard down to East San Carlos and beyond. This is the one location. This is where we have existing parking being retained just south of the station. We would have to reduce the lanes in order to keep that to 11 feet in order to get the 8-foot sidewalk and 8-foot parking on both sides. I then want to talk about the rail spur. This is the existing spur coming down. A lot of talk has been come up in the public workshops and in the bicycle community. We understand that this is a safety issue because these tracks cross at an angle compared to the straight Old County Road. It does create an issue with bike tires getting caught within that track. However, it's a complicated issue that we're trying to currently figure out how and the process to remove those. First, the property ownership. And we think we've narrowed it down to actually Union Pacific actually owns it after it comes down from the tracks up here at such. So we're currently working to figure out how to at least cover them up in a temporary situation, if not just remove them within the street itself. We don't have a clear answer yet, and we'll provide updates to the public as we move forward. This is the area of that railroad spur. We go from 8-foot commercial and residential parking to 10-foot industrial parking. This is consistent with the plans that were developed for the CCAG grant. This is also the area that we go from Sharrows or Class 3 routes to Class 2 bike lanes. This is the transition point here. Now, if we can't remove the tracks, we've been working with John Ciccarelli, who's a bicycle expert, to look at alternative methods with signage and striping in order to direct bicyclists within the area to cross those at 90-degree angles rather than at an angle. And there are precedents. This is actually up in Seattle of that doing it. And because of the configuration here, there is ample space to provide that type of striping. The other area of interest is the Arroyo Underpass. The existing conditions from commercial to the Arroyo Underpass, this actually happens at an angle. You can see there's commercial. Here's the angled crosswalk here going into the underpass. The proposal here is to shift that to a 90-degree crosswalk. It would straddle the two driveways. We would allow for a 5-foot refuge. So this would allow for bikes moving in a northbound direction to be able to merge over and be able to have a spot here to allow them to make the left turn into the Arroyo Underpass and beyond. East San Carlos existing conditions, heavily used by cyclists. You can see that this is the area from Old County Road to Bayport. There's existing parking and existing 10-foot lanes and residents on this side. From Bayport to Industrial, we have a lot of existing industrial buildings here that are using kind of undefined parking, heavily used parking. It's a complicated issue. The idea here is to maximize pedestrian and bicycle connectivity within this corridor and as it goes directly into the train station. However, we recognize that removal of this parking would be a big hardship to the business. So the proposal here is to allow to continue the sidewalk at the right-of-way where feasible, and then where 90-degree parking occurs, that we would allow that we would rotate the shift the sidewalk out, shift the lanes slightly over to allow for 90-degree parking. This would all have rolled curbs in this situation, so that would allow for the cars to maneuver up and down the sidewalk. We believe that the vertical difference in the rolled curb would also provide definitely an awareness to the parked cars as well as awareness for the cars driving by. That would then continue on and meet up with existing sidewalks and then meet up with a new signalized intersection at Industrial Road that would connect up to the pedestrian crossing over to 101. There you can see the sidewalk, the 18-foot parking, 2 travel lanes, and the planting strip. We proposed a series of materials. You'll notice that a lot of the materials are brought from downtown specifically for trying to tie the two areas. The one notable kind of change would be the light fixture, in that we're looking to make a more residential-friendly acorn fixture that doesn't shine light into the neighbors. We also have a plant palette that's consistent with the street tree planting palettes of San Carlos. Now, we did bring these concepts to the community recently, and I wanted to give you some of that feedback. We had about 25 residents show up for that meeting. Some of the topics of discussion for East San Carlos Avenue, the concern of the cars and the new sidewalk there, and the movements of the cars parking versus pedestrians going there. Shuttles and taxis at the train station. There were some people that still wanted the shuttles to be removed from the east side of the tracks and moved over to the El Camino side or west side parking lot as well. The railroad spur, as I mentioned, just continues to be an item of interest and that we're looking into. Right turn lanes at Holly and Old County Road. There were some folks that were concerned about the removal of right turn movements and what that would do to any traffic. Pedestrian safety, just making crosswalks as highly as visible as possible. And there were folks that would like to have wider bike lanes and reducing of the travel lane widths on Old County Road. We also brought this to the Transportation and Circulation Commission, which I think we have a couple members here tonight. In general, the commission was supportive of the plans and the process. They wanted us to take a look at a couple items, including further enhancement of the pedestrian crosswalk at Arroyo, enhancing that with either in-ground LEDs or flashing beacon type crossing. Consider a speed table at Bayport to slow down traffic, and consider high visibility crosswalks throughout.
What would be a speed table?
A speed table is when you slightly elevate the grades within an intersection, so it provides a slight tactile bump per se. You have very slight speed tables on Laurel Street at the crosswalks, so it's very subtle, but it does have a tactile effect when you're driving by that you actually can feel that on your car.
Excuse me, there's one at, I think it's Middlefield in front of the Redwood City Library. They do that. It raises up just a little bit, and then it's all, it's a tiled paver that you drive over.
What are the next steps? I'm hoping tonight that we are provided direction for a means of proceeding. construction documents would be prepared in the fall and winter. We are going to continue to work with our steering committee to work with them and show them how the concepts are developed in construction documents. If you desire, we can bring these plans back to show you as well as they're developing. You will be seeing these plans obviously before they go out to bid, but if you do so choose, we can bring those back in further in the design process. So with that, I'd be open to any questions.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions from the council members? Mr. Lewis.
On the Loyola Gateway feature, did you have an image for that, of what you were considering for the Loyola Park entrance feature?
Not yet. It would be signage in the median, but no, we don't have a specific design yet.
So I mean, I would suggest putting a little bit of design thought into that. I miss it, and I've been going there for 20 years. So I think any way to make that a more friendly and noticeable park would probably up the usage of the park and also just allow for a safer entrance and exit, and also just make it feel a little bit more park friendly. As far as we could press that, I think would be great. It seems to me taxis will stop there anyway, where the shuttles are, just because of the time it takes to get over El Camino, and time is money for cabs and all that. Has the police department weighed in on this idea, and any ideas on how that might be enforced? Or it just seems like they're although the design is an interesting idea, and I would love to see it happen. You know, human nature is such that there's a lot of access from that side of the from the train going to and from San Francisco. So
we've broached the subject with Samtrans and JPB, and initial staff comments are supportive. It's not an official word, but staff level seem to be supportive. As far as police, I don't believe we've run that by police. It would be a signage and an enforcement issue, no doubt. You know, but one that we think could be overcome.
Another question, you know, the speed. I'm actually happy to see the right-hand turn lane go away, because it effectively, you know, one of the problems with Old County Road is people sometimes will zoom up and down that street as an alternative to El Camino Real, and we need to sort of keep those speeds down. Have we thought about, do you know the efficacy of, like in Redwood City, they've done these kind of fun speed limit signs, you know what I mean? It's like, slow down or we'll own your paycheck, or some version of that. Any idea if those are effective? And if they are, I would love to see something like that up and down the Old County Road to sort of say, look, things are changing here and they need to change.
I don't. Jason, do you have anything from that? I can definitely look into that.
I mean, I think they're almost like friendly warnings in a way, and I think that they're mildly humorous at times. So, and maybe we could hire a writer in town to help out with that.
Any suggestions on who that might be?
No, but wittiest person you can think of, Bob.
You have to get 3 bids.
What about the sidewalks on the north side of East San Carlos Avenue? I mean, it does seem like you guys know more about this design than I do, but it does seem like we're sort of, by maintaining the perpendicular parking and putting a sidewalk there, and now encouraging even more bike use, ideally, right? We're trying to encourage that, make it happen, that we're going to get into a lot of potentially blind situations, and we're sort of focusing the usage on the south side of the street. Did you guys consider the north side sidewalk?
We absolutely did. I can't tell you how many different rolls of tracing paper we used to try to figure this out. The amount of traffic on that street is so low that, you know, the visibility of bikes and the ability of bikes to work within traffic is not going to be an issue. We looked at putting the sidewalk on the north side. It's currently existing on the south side between Bayport and, essentially there's 2 blocks. It's Old County Road to Bayport and Bayport to Industrial. So Bayport to Old County Road, it's on the south side. And then we have probably about 50%, up to 50% existing sidewalk on the south side from Bayport to Industrial. That sidewalk really wants to be on that south side to connect those gaps and also to connect up to some of the housing that's on Industrial. So the long-term desire would be for that to be on the south side. We also looked on the north side to see what could happen, and effectively what you'd have to do is have a couple crossings, obviously at Bayport, and then as you move closer to Industrial. That sidewalk then would be next to the residences that haven't had sidewalks, and that's in the backyards, not in the front yards. In addition, we're not able to underground the utilities. There's utility lines that come up within there. So we'd be running into a similar situation about trying to maintain a minimum width for ADA accessibility, kind of weaving in and out of those utility lines there. So with all of that, we felt that the better solution would be, although not ideal, I do agree, is to keep it on the south side.
Okay. And I'm assuming that normal sort of pedestrian and bike and or disabled triggering for the light that goes to East San Carlos Avenue would be available on the west side of Old County there? In other words, there's probably you're talking about a new traffic signal there,
New
right?
traffic signal at Old County Road in East San Carlos and at Industrial in East San Carlos.
Right. And so that'll be some way for pedestrian to activate that. And how do those typically work, or do you think how they'll be timed? Any idea? Like from when the time either a wheelchair person or a bike hits that? Any idea how those might be timed out as far as to favor pedestrian and bicycle crossing?
We'll need to work on that. I mean, maybe Jason can talk a little bit more. He's going to be the one designing that, but it would definitely be something that'll have to be carefully looked at.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Grisilli?
I had a question on the rail spur. Is it being used now?
To the best of what we know, no. And there is actually a blockage. If you look at that photograph, there is a, I don't know what the correct term, my son would know, but there is a blockage there.
Okay.
So trains can't come down.
So can't we just take that? It's abandoned.
Yeah, it's owned. It's actually a pretty simple title owned by Union Pacific, the property, and it crosses a public right of way. And there's some federal regulations related to the railroad right of way, as I understand it. We're looking into the. There's also a bundle of rights that goes with having railroad frontage. So we have to make sure that the people downstream from that don't have any residual rights that we need to deal with.
Okay, well, it's a great idea I had. Right now, I don't have anything else. I might have something at the end, though. Thanks.
Mr. Royce?
So first question deals with, well, first the compliment. I think the group's done a great job in their workshops in the transportation circulation, getting people involved and going through all the options and so forth are great. What I want, and maybe with public comment, I see one of the board members from the Greater East Side is here. I'd really encourage him to speak. I'd like the confirmation that there's a formal board of directors on the Greater East Side. I want to make sure that whole organization is behind this and is part of the ideas on what we're going to do here. I noticed this last weekend we had an opening of a new playground equipment, and I think there was one board member, but since we opened it up, I haven't heard anything, whether or not it's good, bad, indifferent. I notice, in my marriage, if it's that silent, I worry. So I'd like to hear with public comment that they're engaged and involved with this process. Second of 3 points is I wanted to hear more about the impact to the businesses on Old County on parking. I know some of those businesses have 2 or 3 stalls and the employees fill them all up, or sometimes they need space for body shops and things like that. You touched upon that a little bit, but how far-reaching did we go out and engage with the businesses there? So do they know what's going on? Do they have input of what's going on that parking?
Part of that was our concern too, and we actually, Deborah can talk about the exact noticing, but we noticed all the businesses on Old County Road and had a separate meeting for them before the project started.
Okay.
Now,
great.
did we get every single business to come out? No, we didn't.
Sure.
But we did provide the notice, and the input that we did receive, was that the west side, the Caltrain side parking is seldom used, and generally it's used by out-of-town trucking companies that temporarily store a rig or a portion of a rig while they're making a delivery over there.
Super.
So, and that was consistent with everything that we saw when we were out there, and then the community meetings, and therefore that's why we're recommending removal of the majority of that west side parking.
Okay, good. And my last thought is not a question, just a recommendation. Moving the commercial vans, further south probably makes a lot of sense. That needs to be pretty formal. But along with Mr. Lewis, I agree. Taxis, you're not going to control where taxis go. They're going to go where the least resistance is, where the pickups are, where their customers want to be picked up and dropped off. And the other thing going on, there's a 50-50 chance we may do something like called a transit village being built in this area. And talk about the amount of traffic that will input the El Camino side of the railroad and the platform. I just question getting too formalized in trying to control taxis and traffic versus there's too many things going on right now with the city of San Carlos to do something and then have to change it. I'd rather be a little more conservative and let taxis and people manage traffic the best way they think works best for them. So anyway, just a little disagreement I have with how traffic consultants say, this is what we're going to do, we'll move all the taxis here. It doesn't work that way. So pass that on to your team. Thank you.
Mr. Grocott.
These are, I just want to make sure we're doing questions right now. We'll get into discussion later.
I added a comment.
Yeah, okay. All right, just want to make sure. I had a question regarding, I didn't see it in the presentation, regarding pedestrian safety at Holly and Old County for folks who may be going under the underpass. They're walking along Holly, if you will, and they're going under the underpass and then crossing over. Say they're headed in either direction, but in my mind right now I'm just thinking of when you're crossing, and I've done this a couple of times, where you try to cross at that intersection and you're headed east, and it really doesn't feel very safe. That whole intersection, any direction that you're trying to cross as a pedestrian, doesn't feel safe. But I didn't see much in your presentation addressed to that issue.
Those are more subtle enhancements. Based upon that diagram that you saw of people through the desire lines, generally the majority of the residents were coming down Old County Road and then crossing and going underneath the train station in order to go to downtown. Okay. And less people were making that movement underneath Holly Street because of the difficulty crossing El Camino Real at that location.
Yeah, it is very difficult.
So, as far as the improvements that we did, we have widened the sidewalks on the east side of Old County Road. So essentially that does reduce the crossing distance. We have reduced one lane, the free right turn movements. That would also improve the crossing safety. But as far as any additional...
So when you're removing a lane, you're talking about removing a lane on Holly?
No. Oh. No, absolutely not. Okay. Removing a lane on Old County Road, the free right turn lanes on Old County Road,
that. Okay.
Onto Holly.
Oh, okay.
So those movements would help with the safety.
So most of to follow up on that a little bit, the residents are saying that like if you're coming from the north side of Holly and in that neighborhood over there, if they want to get to downtown, they're going to cross over Holly and continue on until they get to the area at East San Carlos Avenue and then go under at the train station and get to the downtown that way.
Yeah, the instructions to the workshop participants were take a pen, show me where you live, and show me where you want to walk, and then show me where the issues are.
Okay.
So you can see, I don't even, this is Holly Street right here.
Okay.
There's the Caltrain station. Here's East San Carlos. I don't see a single person looking to make that underneath. So that's why we focused, and that's why the removal of the taxi stand in order to make that intersection directly where the desire line is going underneath the train station to make that as safe as possible for pedestrians.
So I can see the safety over there, but what kind of improvements are being done? I guess you talked about widening the sidewalk, I think, is what you're saying, but where you're making that cross right there at Holly, you're
Pull up the Holly intersection.
yeah, you're really traversing Old County Road.
So here's Holly Street,
Okay.
and here's Old County Road. I believe the movements that you're talking about are people walking down Holly Street and wanting to make this movement.
Well, from what you're saying that the residents do, then they're more going along.
They're going along
Yeah,
and making
and
this
cross
movement.
right. So what's been done to make that a safer?
Realigning of the crosswalks.
Uh-huh.
We've increased the width of the sidewalks here and here.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we're looking to relocate, if possible, the utility boxes from the signals. Even if we can't, we've made those corners much more visible to oncoming traffic.
Okay. So the turn for the automobile is a little bit tighter if you're turning from Holly onto Old County Road.
Yeah.
Making a right
What's
turn.
helped with we have not reduced the turning radiuses from Holly Street onto Old County Road. We've kept them essentially the same.
Okay.
The reason why it's the same over here is because we have that bike lane that moves that traffic out slightly from the curb.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's the other reason why we're keeping these striped rather than vertical curb type medians.
Okay. My feeling on that is that I don't know. I still see a little weakness in making people feel safe by perhaps keeping the cars back a little bit. I know there's stacking issues with Holly Street in the afternoons. That people coming home, it gets pretty tied up there. But even keeping the traffic back from the intersection, another 3 feet or something might add to the safety feature for pedestrians trying to cross there. Especially, one of the things I'm thinking about, Brian, is if you ever go through there as the year progresses here and it gets dark at 5 and then it's raining, that feels really, really unsafe because people, have the rain on their windshields, they can't see. People are getting anxious about getting home, and they've just taken 2 hours to go from 101 to Old County Road. I'm being facetious, but it gets a little anxious there, and so that's why I'm saying to keep the traffic back from the intersection a little bit might be helpful. Something, I don't know.
Yeah, I'll take a look at that. And the other thing to note is that all the crosswalks are going to be enhanced crosswalks, so they're not just going to be white striped.
Okay.
We're looking at colored crosswalks, and we also are, based upon the Transportation and Circulation Commission recommendations, taking a look at piano key style crosswalks, which are even more highly visible.
Okay.
So that would be another enhancement for pedestrian safety at this intersection.
Okay, great. Thank you. The other question I had is regarding you're talking about removing a dedicated turn lane at Old County onto Holly, I believe. Is that right?
Let me get to that,
Yeah.
the existing photograph right there. So this is the same case. Here's a dedicated right turn lane and a dedicated right turn lane up here.
Both of those will go away?
Yes.
Okay, so my concern is that for a bicyclist, that gets hairy. If you've got if as a bike, now you don't know if the car is going to make a right turn or go straight. And so it's important to create some kind of dedicated lane there, even if it's not the standard 5-foot or 6-foot width for a bike, so that a bike has a place to go and the automobile driver knows that's where the bike is going to go. Because if you're trying to share that lane where someone may turn right or they might go straight, now they might make that, you don't know that they're going to make a right turn, and they make a right turn right into you because you're sitting there. And one of the things I've seen on the BPAC, there was a fellow that brought to us a design that was European that allows the bike to actually get forward of where the cars are stopping. So you look at the stop line for the automobiles, and you allow the cars to get a little bit forward of that.
I should have told you that.
Oh, did you do that?
We are included. That's called a bike box.
Yeah, a bike box,
And
exactly.
essentially what
Thank
that
you.
allows is it stops vehicular traffic 10 feet back of the crosswalk. This is an area that's painted green. It's got large bike symbols. This allows for bicyclists at a red to be able to filter through the cars and be able to come up here and sit within this protected bike box. This allows them to basically get a jump start on traffic.
Right, yeah. Okay. That answers that question. At the rail spur, I'm glad Mr. Grisilli asked about whether it's used or not. Because if it's not being used, have you guys looked into those? There's these rubber. It's like a rubberized mat that has a ramp feature at the end of it. That maybe we could put something like that over until we get the thing resolved, so that the bikes have a way to get up and over that thing and not have to worry about the rail line at all. When I did Cycle Oregon a couple years ago, or it's been a long time ago now, but they had those at the rail crossings. I don't know where they got them, but
So it's a mat.
there's
There's poured in place like rubberized surfacing for playgrounds that we've contemplated internally filling in the gaps between the rails. So that sounds like something.
yeah,
similar.
okay, so that would work too. I was just thinking of the rubberized map. Like on Cycle Oregon, they used them because it was just one-day fair, get the bikes across, and then they took them out. I don't know how permanent on a temporary basis they could be, but it might be something to look into. And then my last question is, I was wondering why I noticed when I was looking at the sections and when I was watching your presentation tonight, these sections that you gave us, there's a lot of change to the automobile lane width. And I know what you're saying, that you're right, the corridor here that you're dealing with changes width a lot, but I was curious about that because it looks like sometimes the lane width gets pretty big, even though it's it's labeled here as a shared deal for bikes and cars. But my concern, the reason I'm asking the question, is if whenever the lane gets really wide, it says to the motorist, go faster. And so I'm just curious on your opinion on that.
So where we have kept the lane width consistent in the bike lane facilities at 12 foot. This is consistent with previous planning studies and traffic reports and such. And it's consistent with the type of traffic and the single lane configuration here. You have gone smaller in other streets, but that's when there's been multiple lanes rather than a single lane in either direction. Where we have the width variation is on the Sharrow, so it's from commercial north. And you're right, in some instances it does go down to 11 foot at this train station, and then in other instances it does go up to 14 foot as you're in kind of the residential neighborhood. And in talking with John Ciccarelli and talking with our traffic engineer, it's because of the shared lane configuration and the type of traffic as far as commercial vehicle traffic that's on here that we felt that not to reduce the lane widths for the entire length and still continue to have 13, 14 foot lane widths for the shared situation in those areas.
So where I'm seeing the 14 foot, there
the Sharrows only,
and there would be Sharrows, Sharrow markings on that.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Grocott. I only have one question. First of all, thank you, Brian, for the community workshop that you held that I did attend. It was a great little event, and a lot of people went out, and it was interesting to see people interact with the maps as opposed to people just writing things down on paper. I think it gave people a much more a larger vision of what you guys were talking about. My only question that's left is, so we're going to turn East San Carlos Avenue into a bike boulevard. Are the shuttles still going to go down East San Carlos Avenue? We're not worried about sending large shuttles down?
The frequency of those shuttles, the lane widths at 10-foot lane widths. We don't have a center line proposed down East San Carlos. All of these combined that the bikes are going to be able to work with those shuttles, and they're currently doing it right now.
Okay.
And it's only going to make it better by having the bike boulevard, which is a further enhancement of a Shero, which basically puts a bike symbol right down the middle of the lane and very, very large. It's only going to make the awareness of bicycles more on that street.
Okay, sounds great. So we will go to public comment right now, and then we'll go to discussion for the council. I only have 2 speaker slips. First is Steve Vanderlip from San Mateo, and then Dimitri Vandelos.
Hi, good evening. My name is Steve Vanderlip. I'm a resident of San Mateo. I'm here tonight to continue to request the removal of the railroad tracks on Old County Road. We included in the East Side Connect project. These tracks are dangerous to cyclists, and I know many people have fallen and crashed there over the last 10 or 20 years or so. And I know you guys talked a lot about this tonight. I just want to show I appreciate all the work everyone's doing to try to address this issue. And I know it's not an easy issue, and it's been around for years, but I'm glad to see that everybody's taking it seriously and doing their best to see what can be done to correct it. So, thank you.
All right, thank you. Next up is Dimitri, and then we will have Bonnie McClure.
Do I need to introduce myself anymore, or you guys know who I am?
If you could introduce yourself for our city clerk, that would be great.
Okay, Dimitri Vandelos, resident of East San Carlos, also GESC board member. First of all, I want to make sure that the City Council is aware that GESC and the neighborhood are big supporters of the project, that we think it's a long overdue facelift for Old County Road, and it's something that's really needed. And also, I've been on the steering committee trying to help out with some of the design decisions. And a big thank you to Brian and Deborah for continuing, for working on the project. So the community still has a couple of concerns that City Council has brought up a number of excellent points. We are very concerned about the pedestrian crossing at Holly. And what we were hoping was for some mechanism that we could do some kind of pedestrian crossing diagonally, because what many folks north of Holly would like to do is, as they're walking across the crosswalk, is just kind of cut across onto the west side and then go under the tracks. And I know that wasn't represented in the pen marks that folks were showing, or it wasn't as obvious, but we were hoping that some way to do that to really improve that intersection, because points that many council members brought up are points that the residents north of Holly are especially concerned about. So we're hoping we can get some more improvements there. I know there are issues with the timing of the signal, but I'm hoping we can get something a little more than what's there currently. We're also concerned. A lot of feedback at the second neighborhood meeting. There was a lot of feedback about shuttle traffic and moving taxis over to the west side. I personally proposed, and a number of residents proposed, to move both the shuttles and taxis to the west side, to the El Camino side. Shuttles never existed on the east side until the berm project, and then all of a sudden they appeared, and for years we've been kind of fighting the shuttle bus operators to not go down the residential streets. And so there's concern by moving it further south. There's 2 points there. If they don't go down McHugh, which is a concern because that would be a residential street, that we're now going to get bi-directional traffic on East San Carlos. So currently now I think that traffic is pretty much one way. It isn't both ways. So there will be increased traffic, and that'll speak to your concern, Andy, about, I'm as concerned as you are about about the shuttles and bikes. And my concern is if we're getting shuttles going in both directions, that could turn into a problem. So we strongly, a number of residents strongly feel that the El Camino side has a turnaround, has the area, and is kind of designed for for being a transit hub. Redwood City has that same, is doing the same thing. It's you know, the connectivity to mass transit is on the west side. So that's another thing that we'd like to just sort of bring up is something maybe to tweak a little bit in the plan. Because I do agree that it's going to be a big enforcement issue if you're just trying to keep shuttles on one side and you know, kind of force the taxis. I'd rather push them both to the west side. The other concern, you know, it's personal concern that I have is the traffic coordinator or subcontractor or whatever hasn't been in any steering committee meetings and was just at the second community workshop. So you know, I had a conversation with him, and I'm concerned that he's that in this design that they've underplayed the impact of those shuttles on the residential communities. But other than those few points, you know, we're big supporters of the project, and we think it's going to be great.
All right, thank you.
Oh, wait, also one, sorry, the last thing is also perhaps diagonal crossings at right where that train station is, because, you know, folks are going to be coming off, bikes are going to be coming off, and perhaps a diagonal allowing for that at the train station. So if folks are going north on Old County or cutting across, and, you know, something like that. So.
Okay, thank you very much. Next up, we have Bonnie McClure.
Bonnie McClure, San Carlos, speaking for Sierra Club. We're very happy that this plan has come this far, and thanks to the former Department of Public Works and to the Planning Department manager, and I think it was great that they got the grant in order to do all of this. We're very firm in supporting biking, and we are looking forward to that bike boulevard on East San Carlos. And not for Sierra Club, but for me, if the speed limit on Old County were cut to 25 miles per hour and that right-hand turn lane is eliminated, it would keep a lot of people like me that go across El Camino, go on Old County, and go down to get to Redwood City, down to Howard, and because I don't want all the stop signs on El Camino, and it's 35, and Old County's 35. Now, if it was cut to 25 and you took that right turn lane away, I think it'd be a big benefit.
Thank you, Ms. McClure. Brian, if we could have you come back up so we can talk about, you can talk a little bit about what the public comments brought up. So, one, we have the possibility about New York stops, essentially, at Hawley. What did you guys find out about that?
It's called a scramble type intersection. As you know, Hawley Street, Old County Road, there's a lot of traffic at peak hours. Any modification, actually what happens with this signal, it's actually controlled by Caltrans. This signal is tied into the El Camino Hawley Street, and they work in tandem. So it's actually, even though this is in city right away, it is a Caltrans signal. So any change to the movements of that signal are going to come in by heavy scrutiny from Caltrans on the review of that. So in reviewing with our traffic engineer Hexagon, we've gone over this in that the scramble intersection in their mind would affect the timing of that signal and change that to a point where it could have an effect.
Okay, and then what about the possibility of moving shuttles onto the parking area of the Samtrans?
You know, that's, people are going to have different opinions on that one. You know, let me move to the slide to show that. If you go on the Caltrain website, they clearly indicate where the shuttle service is. There's at least 4 different shuttles that run to this location here. Since starting this project, not only am I a resident here, but I've sat there at this intersection many mornings and watching this. These are well-behaved. Now, granted, I'm not there 24 hours a day. They're generally well-behaved, and they go right down East San Carlos Avenue. The idea of this being pushed down closer to McHugh, if you know McHugh is a residential street that doesn't go right out to Industrial Road. You have to make a sharp right, and then you have to make a left onto East San Carlos Avenue. So the movements would not be enticing for a shuttle to make that. The movements would be enticing, and currently what they do is to stop here, pick up traffic, and then go down East San Carlos. I have yet to see one of those shuttles come westbound on East San Carlos Avenue because the stop is on the west side. So there is no stop for a shuttle on the north side of East San Carlos nor the east side of Old County Road.
Okay, and then
Through the chair?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, no, it may not be the same question. Do the shuttle operators have to get a permit from the city to operate the shuttle in town?
I'd have to check on that.
And if they do, yeah, I mean, you don't need to answer it right this second, but if they did, perhaps we could discuss that. And if we discuss that, perhaps we could discuss certain routes that they would have to adhere to in order to get the permit or agree to, or some such thing.
Mr. Rubens, you were shaking your head. Is there no permit process for shuttles?
I don't think there is. I was just saying perhaps if they were just a business located in San Carlos, they might need a business license, but I'm not sure if these shuttle operators are here.
I mean, it's enforcement is what we're talking about, and preferred routes are what we're talking about, so seems like that's a place that we should consider going or should go. Did you guys study having those shuttles come to the El Camino side and think about not having them on this side on Old County Road at all?
Did we study it? We took a look at the current schedules of those shuttles, and the way they have them timed is that they barely have enough time to get from their last stop to pick up at the train station. So an additional time coming from Redwood Shores or such in order to pick up on the west side of the train station would probably necessitate some changing of their schedules. Beyond that, no, we did not study movements over there.
And the only other thought, I mean, this is probably, you guys have been over this, so I don't mean to make this too long, is I'm just wondering if you would do it where the lanes go back out to 14 feet on the north side of Holly Street. Maybe have the shuttles pull up there and drop off, and then they could pedestrians could walk over to the train station, some such thing. I'll leave you guys to maybe consider that. You don't need to answer that right this moment.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lewis. Mr. Risley, did you have something about the shuttles?
Yeah, I mean, the shuttles appeared. There's a place for them to go. If there's no place for them to go, they won't be there. They'll be on the other side. I mean, I guess I'm trying to figure out the chicken and the egg here. It's really our plan. It's our city. Do we feel like the shuttles won't run, and then that'll hurt the environment then if we don't allow them to stop on Old County? I mean, I'm trying to understand the logic here. I understand
We're not hurting the environment.
I understand why they're there, but if there's no place for them to be, then they have to go somewhere else, which would be on the other side of the train station. So I'm trying to understand who we're trying to please, or is it hard, or gosh, this is going to be tough to talk to them, or I don't understand. That's what I'm trying to get at here.
Yeah, we could definitely go talk to these purveyors, but there's.
Well, I know what they're going to say. Hey, this is great. They pull over. They don't want to get on El Camino Real. They don't want to take that extra couple of 3 minutes to then take the left into the train. I mean, I can answer that. That's easy. But who are we trying to please here? Are we trying to please them, the train riders, the people who live on the east side? I'm just trying to identify.
In my opinion, we're trying to encourage mass transit. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to make it as safe and enticing as possible, so that we are recognizing that this street does serve, because it's got the train station, does serve beyond just residents and the immediate community. That it does serve mass transit users, and that's what we need to decide if we want to highly support that, and all the effort and scheduling and funding that have gone into all these shuttle stops in this location, if that's something that you want to continue to support.
But they are private shuttles. Are they business shuttles?
It's a program that the city is working with commute.org, and so it is sort of a partnership between the city, we have membership on that JPA, and the businesses. And I think as as Brian indicates, part of the effort in that whole program is to reduce the number of cars going in and out of both San Carlos and in that area. But I think as far as the council's question about is there someone to talk to, there definitely is, and I think the folks to talk to isn't so much the operator, but it's the commute.org folks.
Okay, well, that's why I'm trying to I appreciate that, because it certainly gives a little more clarity to who these folks are.
Yeah,
And
there
that's
are
all
definitely some folks we can talk to.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, and Brian, the last thing brought up with public comment was the speed limit. And I'm under the understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, that speed limit is set by how fast people drive down the road, so you can't just fluctuate the speed limit?
I'm gonna tell Jason that he needs to come up and answer that question. And while he's thinking about it, I want to follow up on the last thing about the scramble crossing, because it not just was talked about at Old County and Holly, but it was also talked about at East San Carlos. In that, if you, by creating this larger pedestrian only zone here, you have a choice coming down here whether to cross this crosswalk or to cross this crosswalk away from traffic. So essentially, if you're going to the communities north, you're not going to cross this one and cross here. You're going to walk over to this crosswalk and go this way. Effectively, it's doing a very similar thing as a scramble crossing and making that diagonal crossing.
Okay, thank you. Jason?
Yeah, actually, Margaret from the Transportation and Circulation Commission actually brought up that question as well about the speed limits. And my suggestion is that, and you're right, Mr. Mayor, is that the speed limits are set by the 85th percentile of the actual people traveling that road. And then an engineering and traffic survey is performed by the city to establish that speed limit. Not entirely on the 85th percentile, but that's a good portion of it. And there is an engineering and traffic survey for this road, and it was set at 35 miles an hour. Now, if you post it at something other than that, it's not enforceable. I mean, it could be considered a speed trap. And so you set the speed limit per the engineering and traffic speed survey. My suggestion is that with the traffic calming measures we're doing here, people might actually start traveling at 30 miles an hour, something like that. Then we'll do a new speed survey, and maybe we post it at 30 afterwards.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Mansfield. So we'll open this up to council discussion. Mr. Grocott, do you have anything?
Well, the only thing that I would, I had three things here. Most of it's been covered. I understand what Brian is saying about the scramble situation being, it's kind of a non-starter if you're going to have to go through Caltrans on that one. But I still would like that to be looked at East San Carlos Avenue. I've always had a vision there. I cross that a lot because I go over to Edward Jones sometimes, and I just walk from downtown from where I live and go through there, and it is very, very tempting. In fact, I've done it a number of times, even though it's not marked, where you just cross diagonally if there's not a lot of traffic. And I've always had a vision there in my mind that intersection would be really cool if it looked like what Foster City has there in front of the Safeway. I don't know how else to describe that area there, but yeah, on Hillsdale, and it's all it turns into brick pavers, and it's a big circle, and and it just says to you as a driver, even on Hillsdale, which is 35-40 miles an hour and multi-laned, slow down. There's a park over here, and there's a Safeway and other stores over here, and people are going to cross this intersection, and they may not cross in the crosswalk. Not that I've ever seen anybody do that there, but here it just seems like a perfect opportunity to maybe do something like that and raise it up. I think you had talked about this is the area where you might do a little bit of a lift to the whole thing. What do you call it, a steep speed table? So, well, maybe we do it here too. I don't know. It's just a thought. And that would serve also to, I think, one of the situations I've seen with bicycles is, people on bikes can be as bad as people in cars when it comes to pedestrians, where they don't slow down and then they get into conflicts with the pedestrians. So if you did something a little bit more here that just kind of said, this is a pedestrian slowdown zone, I think that might work. So that was my comment there. On the shuttles and taxi issue, Bob said it, even though I don't, you're talking about moving them to the west side, but I could just see where you might, we do all this stuff to say to these companies, do this, create these shuttles and everything, and I think if you're going to go that route, and if you're going to encourage that kind of thing, then you have to put the infrastructure in place to make it work. I mean, there's nothing that discourages the use of that kind of stuff more than making it too long to get to work if you're going to choose that route.
I'm bringing it up to see where our priorities are. That's all. And Brian sort of answered that.
Yeah, I understand. Okay, so I just kind of feel like with the shuttles, particularly trying to get them to go to the other side isn't going to work. And I agree with what Brian said, that, hey, I've watched it over there too, and the shuttle drivers do seem to be very courteous. The taxi drivers, on the other hand, if you want to move them to the west side, go ahead. I mean, and if it's an enforcement thing, I think a few times the cops going over there and laying down the law will send a message. And maybe you have to repeat that every once in a while, but, I don't mind laying down the law.
Except when you're crossing diagonally. And you
then I don't want to, right, if I'm jaywalking. Last one I had, and this doesn't have to do with anything that Brian presented, but this undergrounding. I was looking at these figures on the estimated cost, and boy, if I presented that to a client, it says here, could range from $400 to $1,000 per lineal foot, plus a 20% contingency. Well, really what that's saying is it could go anywhere from $400 to $1,200. That's a huge range. I wouldn't even start a project if somebody told me that was the range. So we didn't talk about that one very much, but in my opinion, that needs to be tightened up a lot before we move forward with that undergrounding project. I would, before we move forward with that and commit to a undergrounding utility district or whatever, those numbers need to be a lot tighter than $400 to $1,200 a lineal foot. That's out there. That's it.
Hey, Mr. Royce.
Yeah, no, just Brian did a great job, and I think everybody in this room contributed to a lot of discussion and value to the project. So thank you all.
Okay, Mr. Grisilli.
No, a lot of work went into it. I mean, it's easy to sit up here and second, third guess, whatever, on some of this stuff. I agree with Brian on the scramble at Holly. I think that intersection. I mean, I've driven that 1,000,000 times, and that's too big. Now the one at East San Carlos, different story. I'm open to listening, but that one I think is just too big. I like the taking out the extra lane. I think that's a reasonable thing. Overall, I think it's going to be a huge benefit to the east side, especially but I do agree with you that an $800 range. I mean, you're practically 2.5 times difference.
Yeah.
Those numbers have to get tighter. I mean, that's just too. I mean, I'd be afraid to take the low bid, almost, on that. So anyway, other than that, I don't have any comments.
Hey, Mr. Lewis.
Yeah, and maybe even, I know that we're talking about the crosswalks at Holly and Old County, making them more visible. But maybe even the intersection itself, whether it's probably not pavers, but some way to either color that, or maybe that can be some sort of, some way to make the whole intersection more visible, not unlike the thing Mr. Grocott discussed in that Foster City area. You're just much more visibly aware of it. There was also one other thing in the report about that we can borrow up to 5 years ahead, which makes $1.7 million potentially available. Can you describe how that might come back before council before any sort of a decision like that was made? That's kind of scary.
Yeah, that was an hour ago. So you will have to establish an underground utility district with a map, and our intent was to bring that to you earlier. The reason I put that wide range in the report is we have discovered that there is a wide range in the cost of undergrounding, and an example is the commercial at Old County Road intersection, where there is so much existing infrastructure, including the PG&E gas transmission line. So we need to do this coring work over the next month or so to figure out what's where, and then we'll bring you the district that we could pay for. The borrowing ahead, that number has changed since I first reported that to you in June because of the Public Utilities Commission accounting of our money. But we can borrow up to 5 years ahead. We get a certain allocation per year. We've saved up almost 1.2 million that you haven't spent on an underground utility district since 2001. So we've accumulated 10 years worth of money. We can borrow another 5 into the future. And that's about 1.7 total.
Right. I guess just one thing as debt financing for these things is not a great position, I think, for the city to take in general as a rule. So what mechanism would that come back to council is, I guess, part of the question of that. If we're starting to consider to borrow, does that come back before council?
Well, it is money that you would get in 5 years. That just means you can't do any other district in that 5-year term. That you've committed all that's allocated to this community to the Old County Road project.
Okay.
And it's PG&E's money to spend. That's why we also have to be very careful about how we project the expenses so that they don't want us to overrun because then they're committed to pay for it. So
okay.
We'll be
Thank
careful.
You.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Nelson. Is there anything else? Okay, with that, staff has received the recommendation, so we're good to go. Okay, moving on to item 9A, appeal of Planning Commission approval of a conditional use permit and architectural review permitting 6 new antennas co-locating on the 2 existing antenna support structures at 260 Shelford Avenue. This has been recommended to postpone. Do we have a date, Mr. Savay?
Yeah, we're looking at the October, I believe it's the 24th meeting or the November 14th meeting. And we've talked to the applicant AT&T about those 2 dates so they understand. We've asked them, we want to prepare a peer review, and we just got approval from AT&T to do that. And so it's going to take us a little time to complete that and review it and then complete the staff report. So we're hoping to get it on your 24th meeting at the earliest.
Okay. Is there any public comment? Are there any questions from council? Mr. Grocott.
Yeah, a question on these dates, because I know there were folks who appealed the decision that was made at the Planning Commission. It's their money that's on the line, and so forth. So when you said you've talked to the applicant, the AT&T, about these dates, have you talked to those who put up the money to appeal? Because my understanding, that's a little neighborhood group there. Make sure that these dates are okay with key people in that neighborhood group. I don't know if that's been done or not.
Yes, we provide notification of the changes to the dates and the meetings.
Right, I understand.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Mr. Savay. I know notices go out, letters go out, and so forth. But what I'm saying is there any effort to contact those people other than just a letter that goes out 2 weeks in advance that this is when it's going to happen, to make sure that that key people from those who paid for that appeal are going to be available for these dates, because it's they're the ones that put up the money to make the appeal, and there's some key individuals. I'm just saying this because they contacted, I don't know if they contacted the rest of council. They contacted me. I went and met with them. I walked the property. They showed me where these proposals are and so forth. And that was one of their concerns, is that without having an actual date, some of them travel for business. They don't want to be off traveling for business, and then this happens and then they paid for it.
Yes, and so I think with that we can, as soon as we know exactly when it will be, again, there's a little fluidity here with these 2 dates, but we can, as soon as we know, notify all the folks that we have been in contact with in the appellant here. So I think we can certainly do that.
Okay. And I think one of the fellows that seems to be a key person up there is I think it's Michael Opalenik.
Yeah.
So he's probably a key individual to be in touch with.
Okay.
We'll do that.
Mr. Priscilla, do you have anything?
No, go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, through the chair, before, it's my recommendation that you select a date certain because of the way our municipal code is worded on appeals. and I recommend, as mentioned in the agenda, that you select October 24th as the date certain that you would continue this appeal to.
Mr. Grisilli, do you want to do that?
Well, that's not a problem, except that what happens if they can't, if AT&T wants to kick it back again?
If AT&T wants to kick it back again, we'll have to enter into an agreement with them because there's some time limits that
That's
are
what
applying to this application.
Okay, so basically October 24th is the date.
That's the date, yes.
Okay, great. That's all. Just want to understand the question. Thank you.
Okay, do you need a motion for that, Mr. Rubens?
Okay, I make a motion that we postpone this, or continue this item 9A to a date specific, October 24th, 2011.
Is there a second?
I'll second it, and then I have a question for Mr. Rubens. So, Mr. Rubens, if we do that, and again, there's people that put up money for this, if that doesn't work out for them, what happens?
Well, we will have to talk with AT&T about that because if the reason is that AT&T hasn't completed the peer review, that's been something that's requested by the city in order to and the city council in order to rule on this particular application. But if AT&T doesn't want to agree, I'm going to be recommending that you make a final decision on that date. I know that the appellants in this case have been monitoring this. This has been posted for the last 3 days. I haven't heard anything about it. I know that may not be completely satisfactory, but I know that the neighborhood has been monitoring this, and they know that it's being continued to date certain for a reason. That's one of the reasons, so that the appellants know about it. But I have not been in communication with the appellants on the date. If you'd like, I will contact them, and I'll send them a formal notice that we're continuing it to this date so that they're all aware of that. But that's where we stand right now.
Okay, I guess that'd be good. To disclose here that I met with them, I think it was last week, and at that point there was nobody knew what the date was. So,
and this date and this recommendation, just for the sake of the public and for the council, was just determined literally on Friday. I mean, Thursday, just before the notice was published.
Okay. Madam Clerk.
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Councilmember Lewis?
Yes.
Councilmember Royce?
Yes.
Mayor Klein?
Yes. Okay, moving on. We're going to shuffle up the agenda like we tried to do earlier. We're going to take item 10B before item 10A. There was a request for us to take that earlier, but the audience members weren't here yet. So we will do item 10B first, which is consideration of introducing an ordinance amending St. Carlos Municipal Code, Section 1032, establishing no overnight parking, 2 a.m. to 6 a.m., and 2-hour parking limit zone in front of 75-125 Shoreway Road.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council. If I could just have one moment to exit this presentation here and put up a map of the next presentation. Thank you for your patience. Appreciate it. Back in June, July of this year, city staff had been in contact with members of BioCardia, which is a company that's located at 75 and 125 Shoreway Road. And this map that you see here shows Shoreway Road, the vicinity of Shoreway Road, and the 75 125 property and buildings, and it's the last property before you get to Belmont. So this is now this vacant property here is Belmont. So you access it here, and the complaint that we heard from the business there was regarding the parking of vehicles and trucks and overnight parking that was occurring on Shoreway Road, because the rest of the Shoreway Road has parking restrictions, but this part in front of their business doesn't have any parking restrictions. And so so it's really about just this yellow section here, and then I'll talk a little bit about this section here, which is a safety request. And so what what had been occurring is this is a picture of in the afternoon on a weekday, and so there was commercial parking of various vehicles at all hours of the day, and the vehicles would be left there, and they'd be storing supplies. There'd be recreational vehicles there, people staying overnight, and there were safety and security issues that were cited as well. As you can see, this is the state of affairs out there because there's no parking restrictions in this location. And so the applicant asked city staff to look at doing something about that, looking at the parking and what kind of restrictions could be out there. Staff went out and conducted a survey of the situation, and also worked with the police department with regard to what kinds of enforcement possibilities are there, what could also be enforced out there. And so what we started to look at is overnight parking in other areas of the city and how that works. How do you prevent overnight parking from occurring? And one example is El Camino Real, where you have no 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. parking, and we also have a 2-hour parking restriction in that location. And so that is what is being proposed along in this area here. Again, 2-hour parking restrictions, so signs would go up along here, and also no parking 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. And the police department, public works department were in agreement that that would be an effective parking solution in this location, as did the complainant. We took this issue to the Circulation and Traffic and Circulation Commission on August 16th, and the Traffic and Circulation Commission concurred with this recommendation to go to 2-hour parking in this location, as opposed to restricting it in its entirety and just saying no parking, because this gives you the ability to have some business parking in the area while encouraging turnover of those vehicles and also discouraging overnight parking. One of the other issues that arose at the Transportation and Circulation Commission meeting was there's a driveway here. We call it the south driveway. There's 2 driveways. You can go in to the parking lot, and then most people exit out in this direction here in the south driveway. And one of the issues that was occurring is because of these big trucks, it was difficult for motorists exiting this driveway and going northbound on Shoreway Road. And the applicant, or the complainant rather, was very concerned about that and asked for help. And one of the solutions that was discussed at the Transportation Circulation Commission was to make it so vehicles can't park so close as you're pulling out of the driveway, because as you can see from this photo, as you pull out a little bit more, there's a real visibility issue. And the cars actually travel at a fairly high rate of speed down this roadway. I've observed this. And so if you just get out just enough, it becomes a fairly dangerous situation, and there's actually been accidents out here. So the Transportation Circulation Commission agreed to red striping in this location, left it up to staff in the engineering department to determine the distance of that red striping. And we figure anywhere from, it does say about 10 feet in the staff report, but we may want to do a little more here because you may want to do 2 vehicles to get better visibility down the street. That concludes the staff presentation. Transportation Circulation Commission is recommending that you approve no overnight parking 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. and 2-hour parking limit and the red curbing for this location. That concludes the staff presentation.
All right, thank you, Mr. Savay, and special thank you. This all started, I got a phone call from Supervisor Horsley's office. The complaint originally went to him about what can we do about this, and he called me, and I sent it to staff, and staff worked very, very well with the group there at BioCardia. So I've heard nothing but good things. So thank you very much, and thank you for Supervisor Horsley letting us know. But do we have any questions from City Council? None over here. Mr. Grocott?
Yeah, just have a few. What does Belmont do further down on Shoreway there?
I don't believe there's any parking restriction here either. But interestingly, you don't see vehicles parking there. I've driven by there a number of times, haven't seen the signage, and it could be that it's because of the recycling center here, and that some of these vehicles wait and they store their materials and kind of wait until they can cycle in and dump their materials, and then they just put their trucks there and go off to another job. So that could be part of it.
I noticed on the, if I got this right, there was a no vote on the transportation.
Yes, it was a 5-to-1 vote. There was one no vote.
Or 4-to-1. Any reason, do you know why that person voted no?
I think that perhaps it was a feeling that this was too much of a, we were going too far putting parking restrictions here. I think that, and partially the red curb. The Transportation and Circulation Commission considered red curb to the south of the south driveway, and they did approve that at one time. And I think there may have been some belief that should be enough, and that anything else would be just pushing it a little too far.
And then my last question is, we seem to almost fall into the 2-hour zone pretty frequently, and so I'm just curious about that. Was there any discussion about maybe a 3-hour or a 4-hour or whatever? And part of the reason I ask that is it does become an enforcement issue. If it's 2, ostensibly it means you got to have somebody go out there and check it. So was there any discussion at the TNC about maybe doing a 4-hour, so you don't have to check it as often, but it still does the job of making it so you can't stay there all day long?
Yes, staff presented both options to the TNC, the 4-hour and the 2-hour, so there were some options for them to consider. And because of the unsightly nature of some of those vehicles and the business that is occurring, here is kind of, from a economic development standpoint, it's nice to kind of balance the approach and get more turnover in the vehicles and try and prevent this kind of thing from happening. And so they went with a little more restrictive and trying to get the cars to move a little more instead of having people like this sit out there for 4 hours a day. Police department is familiar with the 2-hour on El Camino and feels comfortable with it. I think that part of it is an educational process. You start by educating the parkers that, hey, this is really enforced, and people get used to it.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Mr. Royce? Okay, nothing. Thank you, Mr. Sabay. We do have one public speaker card. Bernadette, I'll have you come up and pronounce your last name for us. Oh, Subaru. I was going to go with that, but I didn't think so.
Thank you for adjusting the time as well. I appreciate that very much. I'm Bernadette Subaru. I'm with Alexandria Real Estate Equities. We're the owner of this particular piece of real estate, and we also manage the property, and I am the manager. So I speak with 2 hats on, one for the owner and then one on behalf of my 6 tenants. BioCardia and Luidia are the ones most affected because they're at 125 Shoreway Road, which is right there. 75 is a little bit recessed back. But anyway, picture says 1,000 words here, and safety, so on the tenant side as well as the owner side, safety is the #1 thing. In fact, I have posted due to poor visibility, you might want to go take the north driveway if you're going to turn right to go north. We had a near fatality, and we've had 1 totaled car, and then other hits and that kind of thing, and then certainly lots of scares. And so #1 is that visibility issue. And also you see, Mr. Savay, by the way, has really outlined all the bullet points and covered it all, but one other thing is that these are utility vehicles, and so they're high profile, again, giving even, prohibiting our visibility. That's the thing. In addition to that, we on every Friday night, I have in part of my parking lot sweeping contract, I have a chain across the bollards of both entrances there, because in addition, being by the dump, folks tend to use our dumpsters, and you'll find a couch and a dishwasher every Monday morning kind of thing. So we have to do that, and that's fine, but giving you the idea of what's around there. And yet we have these life science companies that are fantastic, and we're very proud to be in San Carlos, and they're happy to be there, and we're happy to have them as tenants paying exceptionally high rent because it's lab office space. And then, this is what we have in front of us. And also to the talk about the linear feet of the red curb, because we have nice signage for our tenants and yet their visitors can't see as well. But that's secondary to the safety of the egress and ingress of the drive lane, particularly the south one. So I think that's probably about it. As far as from the owners and landlord, it doesn't look very nice. I'm trying to keep the landscaping nice, but you can't see it. So things like that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. If there's any discussion, if not, I'll entertain a motion.
Well, I would move approval of the item as recommended by staff and the staff report. Yes, sir.
Just
introduction.
Councilmember Grocott, this comes before you as an introduction to an ordinance because the way we handle parking restrictions is by ordinance in San Carlos.
So I would move that we introduce the ordinance.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second. Go ahead.
Madam Clerk?
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Councilmember Lewis?
Yes.
Councilmember Royce?
Yes.
Mayor Klein?
Yes. Okay, moving back to item 10A. Consideration of adopting a resolution of the City Council authorizing the City Manager to sign a contract with Adrian Littman Architectural Art and Design for the purchase of public art. Mr. Long.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Good evening. My name is Doug Long. I'm the Parks and Recreation Director. As you are aware, one of the objectives of the Art and Culture Commission is to encourage the purchase and display of public arts. However, it's been a difficult proposition because funding has been hard to come by. That being said, there was funds that was set aside for that sole purpose, restricted as it were, for the purchase of public arts. Those funds came from $2,500 came from the 75th anniversary celebration, and $10,000 came from the proceeds for the development of 1001 Laurel. So those funds have been available for a while, and the Arts and Culture Commission decided to aggressively pursue the purchase of public art. So an RFP was issued, and they received 6 submittals the first time around. None of those really fit the requirements that they were looking for, so they resubmitted and reissued the RFP and did receive some art pieces for consideration. Now, the way this was vetted, just so we can understand, it is art. They decided to have a subcommittee, and that subcommittee was comprised of 2 members from the Arts Commission, 1 member from the Parks and Recreation Commission. This piece is recommended to go in Laurel Street Park. 1 from the community representing the Fine Arts Association, and myself representing staff. Each one of the proposals was displayed for public viewing. You can see that they were available for quite some time, and for people to provide their comments regarding each one of the proposals. Adrian Littman submitted 2 proposals. The first is entitled Laurel Wreath, and you can see that that is an enhancement to the existing kiosk, and what it is a clock, which is operated by a lithium battery, and it's a bronze, and it's a decorative piece for the roof, and the roof would include a bronze overlay, which would change the existing tile. James Moore submitted Balancing Act. This is a sculptor, and it has a story behind it. You're welcome to read that. The idea behind this is balancing life with leisure, and he's a pretty renowned artist in the area, and he's done a lot of public projects. This is, again, Adrian Littman, who submitted a porcelain mosaic and to create a bench area, and he superimposed that in where he recommended the location could be. This one is kind of the one that was considered most. This was rather large for that particular area, so the commission kind of considered this design, which provides a kind of a low seating area there. Damian Jones provided Jasper Priestess and Joyful Prayer, and this is a rather large piece of art. When it was considered, they did consider scale and how it would fit for that particular area. Madison Fitzgerald, this is wrought iron. It's kind of hard to envision this. This is actually pieces of glass that are encaged, and you can see the mesh. They've superimposed it there. It's a little difficult to tell from this particular drawing. The background is actually what it would look like. So it's caged glass. David Nilsson, he actually submitted this the first time around. The bald eagle was not considered, but they thought that perhaps the little boy with the airplane may be a consideration for the second time. So this is the locations that were being considered. Again, this is Laurel Street Park, and this is facing from Laurel Street. Here is the kiosk. You can see where the proposed laurel wreath would go. This is an older picture. Right now there's a lot of vegetation there, and the branches actually overhang the roof, so there need to be some kind of trimming done there to accommodate that. And then over here was a proposal for the other art pieces in this area next to Santorini's, which is right here. Although there's an alternative proposal by staff that recommends if you choose an alternative piece of art, for example, the Balancing Act, this would be demolished and a signage board would be relocated in this area here, which is just off the pathway right next to Santorini's. It's highly visible and highly noticeable, so it would work out well for a decorative bulletin board to continue with people who are interested in putting up notices for public viewing at this particular location. When they vetted this, they did make a recommendation. The recommendation of the subcommittee to the Arts and Culture Commission was the laurel wreath, followed very closely by the Balancing Act statue. And then the Arts and Culture Commission considered that in full, and they recommended to the Parks and Recreation Commission, again, because it is going into a park, they recommended laurel wreath, and again, they emphasized that their second choice in the closed section, second, would be Balancing Act. And so they're making a recommendation to council, and again, we're presenting two to council for consideration because both were very close in their determination and what could be put there. So with that information, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have about the purchase of the public art piece.
Are there any questions? Mr. Lewis?
The material on the Balancing Act, the figure, what's the material?
It's steel.
Great, thanks.
Mr. Grisilli?
How tall is that?
The Balancing Act?
Yes.
His head is 5 feet, and the yellow ball would probably be just under like 6'8", somewhere around there.
So relative to the size of the kiosk, I mean,
it would be right around that height at the top. Its appearance would be considerably different, but
obviously,
at the peak, yeah.
But I mean, I'm just trying to visualize in my own mind how tall it would be. So
yeah,
about the size of the kiosk.
Yeah, exactly. It would fit rather well at that particular location.
Mr. Royce, do you have any questions?
Yeah, can you articulate again the demolition of the Site 1 of the kiosk going away? Can't we just continue to use the value there and add another piece of artwork like the Balancing Act? What were your comments on why to remove one and put it on a different spot?
Certainly, and it's again, it's a recommendation. I do get comments that this kiosk is kind of tired and needs to be demoed by some of the public that are going there. It actually is a visual obstruction into the park. Not only that, is this public art piece is the first probably in a long time for the city of San Carlos, so they'd like to showcase it. The location, the alternative location would be where we would propose the alternative bulletin board to be, or notice board to be, and that would be just inside the pathway next to Santorini's here, which would still be visible, and it would fit. Initially it was designed for that location. But the thought was that if it was put over in that location, you wouldn't have quite the 360-degree viewing of that particular piece. You would, but you'd have to go off the path to walk around it. This this location would just be more optimal for that purpose.
Mr. Crogat.
I noticed it didn't get a lot of votes, but when you were going through all the different pieces, the one that appealed to my taste the most is the bronze, that right there, and two reasons. One, it's very classy artwork, sculpture. Those pieces, I've seen those at various places. There's actually a gallery in Half Moon Bay that has those, and you go up to them and you feel like they're alive. I was also in Pleasanton recently. Well, I told the council I went out for a 9/11 memorial, and I happened to go to the library there in Pleasanton, and they have a figure of a little girl reading a book on a bench, and you would swear, I mean, you know it's bronze, but you would swear that she's just going to get up from there with her book and walk away. It's a very nice piece, and the other reason that this is intriguing to me is because of the airplane, and we have it seems to be a tie-in to one of our other features in town, which is the museum, the Hiller Aviation Museum. But where I'm going with this, my question for you is, if we did select that piece, not that we would, because I guess it didn't get near the interest, where would it go?
It would also go in the area that the original proposal for balancing act was, and it would be in this area here. It would fit rather nicely.
And now it's leaning up against, in the picture there, it looks like he's leaning against a wall.
Right. No, that's for display. This is where it would go right there, and it's fairly prominent. You wouldn't miss it if you're walking past the park. People would be able to appreciate that art piece, so it would fit rather nicely there. And that was one of the conditions of the RFP, that they build a piece that would fit in that particular site.
How, given all I've said, how close were these? Like that bronze statue, how close was that to?
Well, Mr. Long, I attended you weren't there, were you? I think it was
not the last one.
Yeah, Amy Griffin was the staff member. So I attended the meeting. They didn't talk about any of the other art pieces but these two, about the balancing act and the laurel wreath. None of the other art pieces they felt fit with the park, or were something that they thought would make a big enough splash to do about public art. So they only talked about these two. So I can't give you their thoughts on anything else because they didn't talk about the others at all.
Well, initially to answer your question, initially at the subcommittee level, this was one of the more popular pieces, but relative to the other two, it finished a distant third. And their consideration is it looked a little bit too commonplace for them. It's something that they see often enough at other locations, whether in public art or private art. So I think that's why it was dismissed compared to the other two pieces.
All right.
One more question.
Mr. Russilli?
I'm sorry. What about the upkeep of either of these?
Very little upkeep to either of these, and that was one of the also stipulations, that we couldn't have something with high maintenance. This one, the balancing act has two things. One is this artist designs them understanding that kids are kids and they will probably climb on it, so he has what he calls the 200-pound drunk test, where he gets on there and just jumps and jumps and tries to do what he can, and so they're built very sturdily. It requires every once in a while just a thin coat of a waxing type of thing, but it would be once every couple of years. Both of them are relatively low maintenance.
Okay, I was just curious.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. We're going to open this up to public comment. Okay, there's no public comments on this item, so we'll open up with discussion. And maybe the way we can do discussion is when you talk about the pieces, talk about which you would prefer, so we can see if we can get some consensus that way, since we haven't really done public art up here in a pretty long time. So, Mr. Lewis, as a resident artist, would you like to start? If you're the money guy, he's the artist.
I mean, there's a variety of considerations for talking about public art, and everybody has a different point of view on it. So it's probably hard to get consensus. The first thing is I would hope that this is just the first discussion of several different pieces of public art, and I think both of them have strengths and weaknesses. I do think public art should be a conversation. That's part of the fun of the art, whether you like it or don't like it. A conversation is nice. I also, I think in broad terms about just appeal. And certainly these are kind of tonally different. I think that's probably why that they've generated a lot of discussion. The laurel wreath, I think, is a beautiful design. But frankly, though I feel a little bit like it gets lost, A, in the kiosk, and B, it's more functional, then it feels like public art to me, even though I know it's artistic and it is classic. And I mean, I really love the design around it. I almost wonder whether or not you'd want to actually continue to take down the kiosk and do something that supported that laurel wreath clock idea in a more artistic fashion and push it. And that might push it out of the budget range. Because I could definitely see on Laurel Street at some point a wreath clock like that, as it could be a beautiful image. I really, when I think of that park, I think about when the band's playing back there. I do think the kiosk right now is a blocker to that park. It's already very small, and I just, you see kids out there dancing when the music is happening, and so, I know it's been through a couple of committees and so forth. My sense of it is that the balancing act is more of a conversation piece, and it's a little more playful. I think it has a little broader appeal, and I think that art should be not so functional that it doesn't actually feel like public art and should generate a conversation. So for my 2 cents, I'd lean more towards that.
Mr. Grisilli?
Well, because I'm the finance man, it's also $150 less. No.
Thank you, Mr. Grisilli. Any other comment? No, just kidding.
Obviously, a facetious comment. Relative to the dollars, it's not relevant at all. Mr. Lewis is so astute in his comments, and I mean that seriously, about how things look and whatever. And art, I mean, I agree with you. I love that I've seen bronze sculptures like that, and they're classic. It's a classic piece. I've actually seen, I think, the wreath almost in some sense with that's more of a classic look. The other piece is very unique. I mean, there's going to be, as Mr. Lewis said, a huge amount of conversation about this. We're not spending $100 million. We're spending, to let the public know, it's $2,500 from a fund that was laid over from our 75th anniversary, and we have a $10,000 donation from the Madison companies. So it's not like it's impacting our budget, our general fund budget, on any of this. I agree that the wreath, or the kiosk, is a little bit worn, and it certainly does block the, when I've stood in the street for the Art and Wine or whatever, and you look to see the music, you can't really see through there because the kiosk is there if you're standing in front of it. So I don't know. If I only have 2 choices, I would probably lean toward the little bit more, something a little bit more exciting, something a little bit more, I don't know, unusual, that would certainly make a statement, I think, for, as Mr. Lewis also said, by piggybacking on him, the beginning of a public art situation that we might be able to even add on in other parts of our city.
Thank you, Mr. Grisilli. Mr. Royce?
Yeah, so when it comes to art, and we had arts and culture, and we had Park and Rec and other representatives, when you get down to making a decision, you got to realize if half the people like it, you're doing great. I mean, everybody's got their own opinion. I do focus on, the kiosk. I'm actually a little bit more favorable towards what we already have there. I think the entrance, because it's on the very front, there's a lot of people that walk by. The foot traffic is incredible. There are messages we put out there. I think because it's torn and tattered, I'm trying to change the agenda here, but with our downtown Wi-Fi system and an iPad, we could spruce up the front of that and show videos and live advertisements and council meetings and Chicken's Ball stuff that's coming up. We could really kind of, with very little technology, less than $1,000 with improvements, we could actually spice that up. And of course, where I'm coming from is I'd like to keep it. I hate when things get torn down and not replaced. I think it does have value, and the technology may be a way to do that. And then lastly, I'll have to agree with my cohorts here. I think, in fact, Mr. Grocott, I think sculpture, if I had something in my house, that's what I'd want. I think in a city, and we're known for this in our city, let's take a risk here. The balancing act has some strange colors to it, but I like it. I like it because it's different. And then at the end of the day, we have a kiosk and we have an additional piece of artwork in our downtown park.
Thank you, Mr. Royce. Mr. Grocott.
Well, I hear what folks are saying about the kiosk being not well located and it blocking a park and that it's tired. But one of the things I remember when I went to my 2 times going to England, you see stuff that's 400 years old. No, in some cases, it's out in the middle of the street and it's 400 years old and it's in the way of everything, but it's 400 years old. And when I saw that when I was there, I thought, we Americans, we tear stuff down too quickly. We don't keep anything. We don't have anything that's got any sense of history to it. So I know the kiosk is old. I guess I lean towards the laurel wreath. I like the idea of the tie-in to, just like with the little boy in the airplane, it ties us into, you know, our something else about our town. Laurel wreath, Laurel Street, you know, I like that. I also have an affinity for public clocks. I know all of us walk around with our, you know, these days with technology, and it's expected everybody knows what time it is because they just look at their iPhone or their iPad or their whatever. But you know, a guy like me, no watches, no iPhone. It's nice, you know. There's something that I appreciate about, like, even when you watch the old movies and you know, there's always the public clock at the train station or something. I love that kind of thing. I was the guy that said to Mr. Bear when, you know, it was his project, Mattson took over, and then Mattson, you know, paid into this fund. I said, John, put a tower, put a clock on that tower on your building. It'd be a really nice addition to the El Camino that you can, you know, that you have a public clock. So for all those reasons, you know, I would lean towards the laurel wreath. My last comment is I think it would give an impetus for improving the kiosk, and part of that improvement, I had a discussion with the city manager about having an effort in the future of doing more with, as part of our outreach to the community, doing more with public signage, and something along the lines of what you were speaking of, Mr. Royce, where we take some of these areas in town where we have public signage and use technology so that we can generate more messages than we do right now.
Through the chair. Just keep in mind, in our strategic plan, one of our public kiosks and signage is on our strategic plan for this year, and that's exactly taking advantage of technology. And I think if there's another location in the park, like you know, Doug represented, I feel like we might be able to get both of those things. The other thing is, I guess, as we generate more conversation, you start to generate a little more passion. I start to feel like the laurel wreath clock is a thing on a thing. In other words, it's a kiosk, and now we're going to put a clock on it, and it's sort of like it's neither. It's sort of two things. It's like a compromise, and sometimes for me, it's not so great. I will just say I have never looked at any information at kiosk in the 20 years I've lived in San Carlos, and I've used other things. I mean, I just think it functionally doesn't work amongst the other things. So, you know, I actually, again, if it was a clock and it had design properties, it would stay there for 200 years. But if it's a kiosk with a clock plugged on top of it, my guess is it won't be here in 200 years. But anyway, it's just, you know, this is what's fun about art, right? We can have a aesthetic, philosophical conversation about it. So bring it on.
Through the chair, if I may, it's why I've seen Brad just wandering around downtown, because he doesn't read the kiosk. And, you know.
I think there might be. Oh no, you're.
Okay, so it sounds like we have two people who are in favor of the balancing act and moving the kiosk to a different location, and then we had two somewhat in favor more of the laurel wreath. So yay, I gotta be a swing vote. I mean, art is in the eye of the beholder. I'm not a huge fan of a lot of styles of art. I'm more into performance art. But when it comes to visual art, I like it to be something that, as Mr. Lewis said, starts a conversation. And so when I saw the laurel wreath, it's more ornamental to me. There's nothing really fun about it. So, I mean, there's a place for that. I just don't think a park downtown that's frequented by kids and concerts is the place for ornamental art. I think that's the place where you want something fun. You want something the kids are going to enjoy. I don't know any kids under the age of 10 who are going to be really excited for a clock on top of a kiosk that looks a little run down. I think the balancing act does symbolize San Carlos. There's been a lot of talk about the laurel wreath symbolizing San Carlos and the bronze boy with the plane symbolizing San Carlos. When we had that branding discussion, their whole thing that they pitched to us was balance. Being able to work hard, but also being able to play. There was a photo of a guy on a bike, like carrying books or something. And that's exactly what this says to me. It's, San Carlos is a community full of people who work incredibly hard, but also have time to play. So if I have to choose between the two, it's not a hard choice for me. I would definitely want to keep some variant of a kiosk in that park, but to move it so the park is a bit more open, and to put the balancing act there so it is a conversation starter. It is fun. I think the kids are really going to enjoy it, but it also is a splash. This is our first piece of public art. I think we need to put something there that's people are going to talk about, that people are going to be like, wow, they have public art downtown now. Not a clock that goes in that I think the majority of people won't even notice, or when they do see it, they'll think, well, how did I miss that? I guess that's been there forever. So
through the chair, the other thing that might be interesting, if the Wheeler Plaza, as we start to plan for that in the future, that being sort of the beginning of Laurel Street, if you will, and sort of a gateway into Laurel Street, might be interesting to keep the Laurel clock idea alive for something like that down the road, and it might be a really nice classic on the corner presentation or something like that. Again, keep in mind, I really like the design idea. I just don't know whether it's on top of the kiosk.
Okay, so Mr. Grisilli, you're pretty amped up to...
No, Mr. Lewis, you want to make the motion, or you want to?
Sure.
Do you remember how to make those, Mr. Lewis?
Yes, thank you. I'd like to make a motion to adopt resolution number.
We're about to get interrupted here. So.
Just want to point out for the record that on the resolution for the James Moore piece as the alternate, it lists Adrian Littman.
Oh, that's right, it does, huh?
Under the now, therefore it be resolved section, where it should say James Moore.
Right.
Okay, so noted. Mr. Lewis?
I'd like to move for approval of resolution number 2011-88, the resolution of the City Council of the City of San Carlos authorizing the city manager to sign a contract for the purchase of public art titled
Balancing Act.
Balancing Act by James Moore.
That's the second. That's the next one.
Okay, so I'm done now, aren't I?
You're done.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, Madam Clerk.
There's two.
I don't mean to interrupt you two, but...
We're having a good time over here. Thank you, yeah.
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
I'm going to stick with my, I'm going to vote no. Stick with my opinion on the art.
Councilmember
So you're not
Lewis?
voting no on public art, you're just voting no on this
Yeah,
piece.
just, right, exactly.
That's perfect.
It's intended to generate conversation. Yes.
Yeah.
Councilmember Lewis? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, you just said yes?
Councilmember Royce?
Yes.
Mayor Klein?
Yes. Okay, moving on to item 10C. We have 1, 2, 3...
That's one question?
Yes.
Excuse me, Mr. Long? Just one quick question. What's the time frame on this?
Tomorrow.
60 days? Oh, okay. Great. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. Sorry.
No problem. They already bought it based on they figured that's the way we're going to go. That's not true for anyone watching, just so. Yeah, I saw Mr. Maltby roll his eyes. That was a joke. Ms. Mendenhall, 10C.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Rebecca Mendenhall, Administrative Services Director. So before you tonight are 6 items for your consideration. The first 4 are directly related to the formation of the new San Carlos Fire Department, and they include an amendment to the Salary and Benefit Resolution Appendix for the JPA transitioning employees, a resolution of intent to amend the safety contract with CalPERS to establish the 2% at 50 pension benefit, the introduction of an ordinance authorizing the CalPERS contract amendment, and a resolution to elect PEMCA healthcare coverage. The last 2 items relate to the dissolution of the Belmont San Carlos Fire Department and include a resolution authorizing continuation of funding utilizing reserves and the approval of a settlement agreement with AFSCME. So the first item for consideration is the amendment of the Salary and Benefit Appendix. On May 9th, Council approved a 5-step base salary schedule at 5% below the current rate of pay of the Belmont San Carlos Fire Department. This was applied to steps 1 through 5 of the JPA. The city maintains a 5-step salary schedule with 5% increments between steps. This is consistent with all job classes and specifications. Step 6 was not considered at the time, as it was explained that this was a longevity rate or a specialty rate. The city does not provide any seniority-based compensation in any other classification. On July 11th, the council took action to reduce salaries by an additional 2.5% for a total of 7.5% reduction in base pay. The current JPA salary schedule for firefighters, firefighter paramedics, and the fire inspector is a 6-step schedule. There are 8 transitioning employees who are currently at Step 6. Rather than bring them in at 7.5% less than the JPA Step 5, it's recommended that council approves a red circle rate for these 8 transitioning employees. The red circle rate would be based on 7.5% less than the JPA Step 6 base salary. If approved, the employee's salary would be frozen at this rate until such time that the current salary equals or exceeds the red circle rate. And that concludes my presentation on this item.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions from council? Mr. Russilli?
I'm sorry. Just give me an example of what that sentence is confusing to me. It freezes the thing until such time as the current salary rate equals or exceeds the red circle rate. Give me an example.
So it's the same thing as a Y rating. So it would be, they would be at a higher rate of pay.
Right.
And so they would be
I got that
frozen there
part.
until the other salaries, either through CPA increase or COLA increases or other increases, reach that rate.
So there's no detriment to them. It's just they stay there until it gets higher, and then they would go to the higher rate, if assuming it's
Yes.
negotiated. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Grocott, did you have any? No. Okay, seeing no other questions, is there any public comment? Seeing none, we're going to have to do these one by one, right, Ms. Mendenhall?
Yes.
Okay, I'll need a motion for 10C1.
I'll make a motion to approve resolution number 2011-89, resolution of the City Council of the City of San Carlos, adopting resolution amending the San Carlos Fire Department salary and benefits resolution salary appendix for the Belmont San Carlos Fire Department employees transitioning to the San Carlos Fire Department.
Is there a second? Second. Madam Clerk?
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Councilmember Lewis?
Yes.
Councilmember Royce?
Yes.
Mayor Klein?
Yes. Next, 10C2.
Okay, the next item for approval is the resolution of intent to amend our safety contract with CalPERS. On June 27th, Council approved a pension formula of 2% at 50, using the highest 3-year average for final compensation calculations. On September 12th, staff received evaluation from the CalPERS Actuarial Office, setting the city's employer rate at 19.169%. Since we have less than 100 active employees, we are required to participate in a risk pool. Therefore, our rate is made up of 14.014% of normal cost and 5.155% associated with the amortization of the gains or losses in the risk pool. As of June 30th, 2009, the risk pool is 61.3% funded, which is down from 88.8% the prior year. Unfortunately, as of today, we do not have any additional or more current information from CalPERS related to the current funding status of the pool. CalPERS, when they do their actuarial valuations, they run 2 years behind. The total costs associated with the pension formula for fiscal year 2012 are $291,100, and they've been included in the 2012 adopted budget. So that concludes my presentation on this item. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from council? Mr. Grisilli?
Sorry. I see it says an estimated total pension cost of $398,400. You said
That's for a 12-month period. Because we're coming in for a partial year, it's prorated.
What this 19%, is this for all the city employees or just for the fire
The
employees?
sworn employees only.
I'm sorry?
For the sworn employees
So
of
just
the
for
fire
the fire
department.
sworn employees?
Yes.
It's not for all the other city employees, any other city employees. And why did we go from 88 to 66 or whatever?
It's based on the funding status of the risk pool. So from June 30th, 2008 to June 30th, 2009, the CalPERS investment pool lost a lot of their lost a lot of money during the investments, and therefore it went from 88 to 61.
So we could go to another city in the peninsula and they would have the same lower rate? In other words, they would
Every participating agency in the pool has the same rate.
Okay, so everybody dropped from 88 to 67 or whatever you said.
If they're part of the risk pool. Some of the larger cities, such like Daly City, probably, and I'm not sure about Redwood City, but Daly City I know has their own they're not part of the risk pool because they have more than 100 active
Okay,
employees.
but again, I'm just trying to identify, in this risk pool, there's some other cities in this county that have that?
Yes.
And they'd all drop from 88 to 67 or whatever your number
Yes.
was? Okay. Thank you, I'm sorry.
Any other questions? Mr. Royce? Or would you like to make a motion?
Sure.
Mr. Grocott.
Sorry, I'm just curious, is this the same risk pool that Belmont San Carlos Fire Department's in? And what was the rate that compared to this 19.18 or 169, what was the rate for our employees who are 3 at 55?
The JPA rate was much higher because it also included a side fund allocation and amortization. It was about it was over 60%. I don't have that information right in front of me, but
It's curious to me because I thought with the 3 at 55, the new employees were at like 17%. That's I was a little surprised to see the 19.
I apologize. I don't have that information in front of me. I can get that for you.
But also that would, because I think the 3 at 5 is at a different, it's the 3 at 50 that has the side fund. The 3 at 55 does not have the
3
side
at
fund.
55 does not, no.
But they may have been at a lower rate because of, since CalPERS runs 2 years behind, they may have not taken account of the losses yet, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, possibly.
Okay, it's just curiosity.
Mr. Royce?
I'd like to make a resolution number 2011.
90.
This is a resolution of the City Council of the City of San Carlos and intention to improve and amended to the contract between the Board of Administration, California Public Employees Retirement System, and the City of San Carlos.
Is there a second?
Second.
Madam Clerk?
Councilmember Grisilli?
I'm going to vote no on this because I think I voted no last time because I don't agree with the 2% at 50, so I vote no.
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Councilmember Lewis?
Yes.
Councilmember Royce?
Yes.
Mayor Klein?
Yes. Moving on to 10C, number 3.
Okay, this item is similar to the last. This is the introduction of an ordinance approving the amendment to the CalPERS contract to create the 2% at 50 retirement tier. This is the next step in the CalPERS process. There's a few of these, so
Okay,
bear with
Mr.
me.
Royce?
Tonight will be the first reading of this ordinance under CalPERS rules after a 20-day wait period, or on October 17th, Council will be considering an approval of an urgency ordinance which would establish the effective date of our pension formula as October 24th. On October 24th, Council will hear the second reading of this ordinance. Following the second reading, the first ordinance will become effective November 24th. The urgency ordinance for consideration on October 17th will move the effective date from November 24th to October 24th. And since our contract provides for 100% prior service, our employees will have pension coverage retroactive to their hire date. So even employees who've been hired today would have service credit from today moving forward.
Okay, any questions? Someone like to make a motion?
So, this is an ordinance number,
1436, and you're introducing it.
it's an ordinance of the City Council, City of San Carlos, authorizing an amendment to the contract between the City Council and the City of San Carlos and the Board of Administration of the California Public Employees Retirement System.
So you're moving introduction of the ordinance?
Yes.
Is there a second?
Second.
Madam Clerk?
Councilmember Grisilli?
I guess to be consistent, I vote no.
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Councilmember Lewis?
Yes.
Councilmember Royce?
Yes.
Mayor Klein?
Yes. Moving on to item 10C4.
Okay, the final item related to the formation of the new department is the consideration of authorization to participate in PEMCA. That's the Public Employees Medical and Hospital Care Act, or health coverage for CalPERS Medical. PEMCA requires the resolution attached to your staff report to be adopted before the sworn employees can participate in the city's health plan. The resolution allows for health coverage consistent with other city employees and establishes an effective date of November 1st. The transitioning employees from the JPA will have coverage through the Belmont San Carlos Fire Department through October 31st and therefore will not have any lapse in coverage. The total cost for the PEMCA coverage is $21,000. The total cost for health coverage for sworn employees is $217,400. All of these costs have been incorporated into the adopted budget.
Are there any questions? Seeing none?
So hold on. I just more of an academic question, really, than anything else. But just looking at the alternatives, which don't seem like much. Truly, are there, Rebecca, any alternatives to this? Is there any other way to provide health care coverage to these employees? Is there anything that we're not thinking of?
If we chose to not participate in a CalPERS health plan, that is an option. But in order to maintain the same coverage consistent with all other city employees, there really isn't another option.
Okay, so there's no sensibility in starting something different with these employees because it's a brand new department, and then moving other employees towards something like that in the future that's not an option.
It's something that we could look into, given the timing. I'm not sure that it would be.
I'm sorry, council members, but I'm just trying to think a little bit creatively. I think Rebecca's probably not right. That or Rebecca is correct. That timing-wise, but it's something that we've talked about even with retirement, and you just went through the whole thing about approving the 2% at 50, but we've certainly had discussions as a council about looking at for retirement of other options. As something that was brought up in the strategic planning is to begin looking at that, and the thought just occurred to me, and the reason I asked the question is perhaps looking at healthcare and how we do healthcare might be an easier, lower hanging fruit to sort of change that and lower the cost, then look at retirement benefits. I don't know, but that just occurred to me, and that's why I wanted to throw the question out there.
Ms. Mendenhall, so to clarify, just to make sure we can stay on topic, if we're part of PERS, we have to be part of this, correct? No. Okay. So Mr. Grocott is correct in saying that we could look at other healthcare options.
We could.
But you're just saying due to time that we really can't.
Well, if I may, through the chair, not only time, which that is a big part of where we're at right now, but also because you've entered into an agreement with the employees from the JPA that are transitioning over that you would provide this benefit this way. Mm-hmm. So this action is really just to comply with the agreement you've already made. So in the future, when you're doing a labor agreement or an MOU, if there's a desire on the part of the council to make that kind of change, that would be the time you wanted to do it, and then we would follow up with whatever administrative action was required to implement that change.
Well, to be clear, as I said to Ms. Mendenhall when I asked the question, I was being a little bit academic about it, but I do mean to send a message that this council member is interested in looking at different ways to do all these things if it can save us money, and I think probably you'd find consensus up here on that issue. So it's sort of the shot over the bow, if you will, by asking the question, that I think it's something we need to start looking at and get creative about.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Grocott.
Sorry, one quick question. What were the benefits that the JPA was paying or relative to this?
The benefits that we have that have been included in the salary and benefit resolution are consistent with all of our other city employees.
Right, I understand that. But before, what was the firefighters? Were they getting the PEMCA minimum, $108, or was it a different number?
They were getting the PEMCA minimum.
So they're getting the same number. So it
and
doesn't.
Then, in addition, the health care, that they had a different health coverage rate than we do now. So the total cost for health care includes the PEMCA minimum.
I'm not looking at the total cost. I'm looking at the benefits to the individual. Did they have this benefit exactly the same? Are we having the same benefit that they had before? Now they're getting, or is the benefit lowered?
The PEMCA minimum is the same.
So they got, if we still had the joint powers with Belmont, it was 108, 112, and now it's going to be 108, 112. No change.
Yes.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay.
I'd like to make a motion for the approval of adoption of resolution number 2011-91, the resolution of the City Council of the City of San Carlos electing to be subject to the Public Employees Medical and Hospital Care Act only with respect to members of a specific employee organization and fixing the employer's contribution at an amount greater than prescribed by section 22892B of the Government Code.
Second.
Madam Clerk.
Councilmember Grisilli?
Hold on. I'm sorry. Just a clarification on Mr. Grisilli's question before we vote. I I do believe one thing that was different is when the city went to a change on folks who don't elect to take the health care and take the pay part of it instead. That didn't change for the fire department, but it did change for all city employees, including us as council members. And I don't think that happened at the fire department level. So if a firefighter had a spouse who had health care and they chose to get their health care through their spouse and take the money of the benefit from the fire department, I think they got the full payout. That never changed for them, and that's the part that will change, because they're coming under employment directly from the city and not the JPA. So I think just to clarify,
you've thoroughly confused me. I'm just making sure that it's the same. It was the same thing before, and it's the same thing now. And you're assuring me it is.
Let me jump in here, because it's not.
Okay, that's why I'm asking the question.
In the regard that Councilmember Grocott is talking about, when you're talking about the medical benefits that the employees of the JPA were receiving compared to the medical benefits that they'd be receiving as San Carlos employees, there's a difference.
Right.
In regard to this specific action, which is dealing with just the PEMCA minimum, there is no difference. So I think you're talking about apples and oranges a little bit. But to answer your question, the medical benefits are a little bit different. Councilmember Grocott pointed out probably the largest difference, which is that alt medical benefit payout that we no longer offer.
I understand. I was just asking specifically about this PEMCA minimum.
Just wanted to be clear.
Okay.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk?
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Councilmember Lewis?
Yes.
Councilmember Royce?
Yes.
Mayor Klein?
Yes. Moving to 10C5, consideration of resolution authorizing continuation of funding for the Belmont St. Carlos Fire Department after service termination date. Sorry.
Okay, this item relates to the dissolution, and it's the adoption of a resolution to authorize continuation of funding. On September 12th, the JPA Fire Board approved the continuation of funding using fund balances or reserves to cover expenditures incurred subsequent to service termination. Although there's no additional cost to either agency, since this is a budget amendment, it requires the approval of both member agencies.
Are there any questions from the council members?
I remember so much discussion about spending down the reserves.
There will be practically, I believe there will be nothing left. If anything, we may owe a little bit, right, Mr. Maltby?
Yeah, if I recall, Thomas Phil, the finance director's last report on this issue, there are currently reserves now, but the plan, rather than to return money to each agency at this point, at the point of dissolution, is to hold on to that money, spend it down as the remaining bills come in. Eventually, when you get to the point, probably a year or so from now, where we're addressing the issue of the retirement liability, the side fund, and how that gets divided up or whatnot, it would exceed any money that the JPA's actually got, and we'd likely, both agencies would be writing a check to close out those final bills.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Entertain a motion.
Make a motion to approve resolution number 2011-
92.
Authorization of City Council of the City of San Carlos to continue funding for the Belmont San Carlos Fire Department after the service termination date of September 30th, 2011.
Second that.
Madam Clerk?
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Councilmember Lewis?
Yes.
Councilmember Royce?
Yes.
Mayor Klein?
Yes. 10C6.
The final item for consideration tonight is the approval of the settlement agreement with AFSCME. Over the past several months, staff's been working closely with the JPA, the City of Belmont on the dissolution of the Belmont San Carlos Fire Department. As part of these discussions, the councils and staff from both agencies have been working with the existing labor unions, FMU or the Fire Management Unit, Local 2400, and AFSCME. On August 22nd, Council approved the transitional MOU with the Fire Management Unit and Local 2400, which established salaries and benefits for transitional employees and therefore released all claims. AFSCME has one represented employee at the JPA who holds the position of administrative assistant. Since neither agency has a position in their respective fire departments, this employee will be laid off as of September 30th. The settlement agreement before you tonight will release all claims with AFSCME, and the terms of the agreement are as follows. Accrued leave payments will be cashed out in accordance with the existing MOU. The pension and retirement benefits will be vested for employees who retire on or before the service termination date. The deferred comp plan will be maintained after the service termination date, and the employee assistance program will be effective through October 12th. The dental plan coverage will be in place until September 30th. The personnel files will be maintained in accordance with state law. The dissolution or service termination date has been set at September 30th. The approval of this settlement agreement between both AFSCME and the with the approval of this settlement agreement, AFSCME and the JPA acknowledge that the parties have satisfied their obligations under California law, and any prior or existing agreements by the parties, whether formal or informal, are terminated. And for the release of all claims, this one employee will receive a lump sum payment on September 30th of $36,000. The San Carlos share of this will be 52.9%, or $19,076. I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Are there any questions from council members? Seeing none, we'll entertain a motion.
Make a motion to approve resolution number 2011-93, resolution of the City Council of the City of San Carlos approving the settlement agreement and general release of claims between the agency and the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, AFL-CIO.
Is there a second?
I'll second, and then I would like to add a comment.
Okay.
And that is, it was said in the paper that everybody got jobs. That's not true. Not everybody did get jobs, and some of this, as some of this shows, I think everybody worked to make this go as smoothly as possible. It was not always a pretty situation, and lives were affected. People's plans were changed, their retirement when they wanted to retire, etc. So it's not as simple as everybody got a job, everybody didn't, and it was a big change. And I just think it's important to keep in mind that when we make decisions up here on this dais, there are times where we affect people's lives. And whether you agree with the direction that things went or you don't agree is a little bit immaterial when you're talking about people. And I think that's something that we always have to keep in mind, and we always have to look at this from the human perspective and try to take care of folks as much as we can. And I think that's what we tried to do here.
Okay. Madam Clerk?
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Councilmember Lewis?
Yes.
Councilmember Royce?
Yes.
Mayor Klein?
Yes. And with that, we are adjourned.